Did you miss me? She said it before he could even open his mouth. Right there, in the middle of Denver International Airport, surrounded by strangers, rolling luggage, and 5 years of silence, Lily Morgan looked directly at Ethan Parker and said those 4 words like she'd been holding them the entire flight. And Ethan Parker, a man who had rewired electrical panels in thunderstorms without flinching, who had raised a daughter alone without asking anyone for help, who had spent 5 years telling himself he was completely fine, stood there with his keys still in his hand, and said absolutely nothing. Because the woman standing in front of him was not the neighbor he had been carefully not thinking about for 5 years. She was something that hit harder. And the worst part? She already knew it. Drop a comment right now. Tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. And if nobody's told you to subscribe, yet do it. Because what happens next between these two? You are not ready. Ethan Parker had been staring at the same crack in his kitchen ceiling for 11 minutes. He knew it was 11 minutes because the microwave clock had been blinking 6:47 since the power surge 2 weeks ago. And he'd been meaning to fix it. And he hadn't, and the crack was still there. And his coffee was cold. And his daughter was going to be late for school if he didn't move in the next 30 seconds. Dad, I'm up. Dad, you're literally just standing there. I'm thinking. You've been thinking since yesterday. His daughter, Maya, 14 years old, and about as subtle as a car alarm, dropped her backpack onto the kitchen chair with enough force to rattle the table. She looked at him, the way teenagers look at adults they love but have given up understanding. It's mom's text, isn't it? It's not your mother's text. Then what is it? He finally looked away from the ceiling. Maya was standing there, with her dark hair half braided. One section left loose because she never finished anything before breakfast. Wearing his old Colorado Rockies sweatshirt with the sleeve stretched out at the cuff. She looked more like him every year, and it both terrified and moved him in ways he couldn't explain to another human being. Mrs. Morgan called, he said. Maya blinked. Mrs. Morgan. Lily's mom? Yeah. Lily's coming back? Her flight gets in at noon. There was a pause. Maya tilted her head, that gesture she'd had since she was 3, when she was processing something that didn't fit into the category of things she already understood. Then, slowly, a smile started at the corner of her mouth. And she needs a ride? Her mom can't drive anymore. Her knee. So you're going to pick her up. I'm the neighbor. You're her neighbor, Maya said. And the way she said the word, stretched out, loaded, meaningful, made him feel like he was the 14-year-old and she was the adult. Stop, he said. I'm not doing anything. You're doing the thing. I'm eating breakfast. She reached for an apple and bit into it with the composure of someone who had already won the argument. Are you nervous? No. Your coffee's been cold for 10 minutes. I know. You hate cold coffee. Maya, I'm just saying. He picked up the mug, looked at it, and set it back down. I'll see you after school. She grabbed her backpack and walked toward the door, then stopped with her hand on the frame, another habit. Dramatic pausing. She definitely didn't get that from him. Dad? What? Don't overthink it. She looked back at him. She's just Lily. She left. Ethan stood in the kitchen alone for a moment, listening to the silence of a house that had held just the two of them for years. Then he said, to nobody in particular, she's not just Lily. He drove to Denver International with the radio off. That was unusual for him. Ethan Parker was a man who believed in the distraction of noise, classic rock when he was working, talk radio when he was driving, whatever Maya was playing when he needed to remember that the world still had energy in it. Silence meant he was thinking too hard, and thinking too hard usually meant he was standing at the edge of something he wasn't sure he wanted to step toward. He'd been thinking about Lily Morgan since the phone rang at 7 this morning. Not because 5 years had passed. Not because she'd left without more than a conversation and a wave from her driveway. Not even because of the dozen small moments he'd filed away under the heading of things that don't mean anything. The time she brought soup when Maya had the flu. The time she sat on his porch steps after he lost a work contract and just talked to him about nothing until it was midnight. The time she laughed so hard at something he said that she had to hold the counter to stay upright. He'd been thinking about Lily because he hadn't let himself think about her in 5 years. And now she was 20 minutes away, and all that time he'd spent not thinking about her seemed to be showing up at once, like a bill that had finally come due. He pulled into the arrivals lane and checked his phone. Her message was 4 words: flight landed. Same terminal. He got out of the truck. The thing about Denver International Airport is that it has a particular kind of acoustic high ceilings, hard floors, the constant undertow of movement and announcements that makes a person feel simultaneously invisible and exposed, like standing in the ocean. You are very small. The current is very real. Ethan stood near the glass doors of the arrivals exit, hands in his jacket pockets, watching travelers come through in waves, families reuniting, business people moving fast with their eyes on their phones, an older woman being helped by an airline employee, a group of college students who looked like they hadn't slept in 2 days. He watched all of them without seeing any of them, and then the doors opened and he saw her. She came through alone, pulling a large gray suitcase behind her, a leather carry-on bag across one shoulder, wearing a dark rust-colored coat that hit her at the knee. Her hair was different longer now, darker at the roots, and she'd done something with it that made it fall differently than he remembered. She was wearing boots with a slight heel, and she walked like a woman who knew where she was going and had stopped being surprised by the distance. She was heavier than she'd been 5 years ago. He noticed that the way you notice whether it's there. It's real, it shapes the environment, and then his attention moved past it almost immediately. The way it moves past weather, to the thing underneath, the way she was scanning the crowd with focused, calm eyes, the way her chin was lifted, the way she hadn't spotted him yet and was navigating entirely on her own terms. Then she did spot him, and she stopped, just for a second, one beat, long enough for him to see something cross her face that he couldn't name: relief, maybe, or surprise, or something older than both of those. And then she was moving toward him again, and the distance between them closed, and she stopped 3 feet away. Ethan. Her voice was exactly the same. Hey, Lily. They stood there for a moment, 2 people who used to know each other, figuring out what version of knowing that was now. Then she tilted her head slightly and looked at him with those dark eyes he'd forgotten were that direct. Did you miss me? He opened his mouth, closed it, said you look good. She smiled, slow and a little wry. That wasn't the question. I know, but noted. She reached out and briefly squeezed his arm, a warm, practical gesture, more greeting than anything else, and then looked at the exit. Should we go? I'm exhausted and I've been eating airport food for 6 hours. Yeah. He reached for a suitcase. Here, I've got it. I know you've got it. I'm offering. She looked at him, measuring something. Then she let go of the handle. Fine. They walked toward the exit together, and he didn't say what he'd almost said. Yes. I missed you. And I didn't understand what that meant until right now. The drive back toward their neighborhood was mostly quiet, at first, not uncomfortable, but careful. The kind of quiet that exists between people who used to talk easily and are now taking inventory of each other before speaking. Lily sat in the passenger seat with her carry-on on her lap, looking out the window at Colorado, coming back into view, the flat brown of the plains, the mountains in the western distance, the particular quality of light that she had apparently been carrying somewhere inside her, without realizing it, because she made a small sound when she saw the peaks. I forgot, she said. What? How big they look. I was in Seattle for 3 years, then Portland. You get used to trees. You forget how open this is. She was quiet for a moment. How's Maya? 14 and terrifying, she laughed, and the sound of it was like a door opening. That sounds right. She was what, 9-10 when I left? 9. She's probably taller than me now. She's definitely taller than you now. Lily turned from the window and looked at him. And you? Hi, good, Ethan. I'm good, Lily. You said it the same way both times. That means it's the answer you give people when you're not actually going to answer. He glanced at her sideways. You remembered that. I remember a lot of things. She settled back in the seat. You don't have to tell me. I'm just asking. He drove for a while. Then, work's been steady. I took on a commercial contract last year bigger than anything I'd done before. Maya's doing well in school. She wants to study environmental science, which makes no sense, Because she can't keep a plant alive. But I've learned not to point that out. Lily smiled. That's your life, Ethan. I asked how you are. He was quiet. Same thing, he said finally. She didn't push. That was one of the things he'd always appreciated about her. She knew when to let something sit. She just turned back to the window and watched Colorado welcome her home. And he gripped the steering wheel and thought about how 5 years of not thinking about someone could collapse into 20 minutes on the highway. Why did you come back? He asked. Portland seemed like it was going well. It was, she said. Good job, good apartment, nice city. So why? She was quiet for a moment. Not evasive processing. He could tell the difference. Then have you ever been somewhere that's perfect? On paper and just not home? Yeah. She paused. Also, my mom's knee is getting worse. She wouldn't tell me how bad it was, but I could hear it in her voice on the phone. She does that thing where she describes problems at about 40% of their actual severity. My mother does the same thing. All mothers do the same thing. She shifted in her seat, and I wanted to come back. I think I just needed to go first, to understand that I wanted to come back. If that makes sense. It makes sense. Does it? You needed to know you had a choice. About being here. She turned and looked at him fully, then not a sideways glance. A full look like she was reassessing something. Yeah, she said quietly. That's exactly it. She was home for 2 days before he saw her again. He told himself that was normal. She needed time to settle. She had her mother to deal with, unpacking to do, a remote job to reconnect with. He had a commercial installation job on the east side that had been running 3 days behind schedule. Maya had volleyball. There were legitimate reasons. He was still standing at his kitchen window at 6 in the morning when he saw her porch light. Come on. She came out in a thick cardigan and wool, socks, no shoes, carrying a mug. And she sat down on her porch steps the same way she used to. Elbows on her knees, looking out at the street. The same posture. 5 years later. Like a photograph he'd taken a long time ago, and then forgotten he'd taken, and then found in a box. He didn't plan what he did next. He poured a second cup of coffee. He walked outside. She heard him coming across the lawn and looked up without surprise. You always were an early riser. You always were too. He came up the walk and she moved over on the step without being asked. He sat down beside her, close enough that the sleeves of their jackets almost touched. He handed her the second mug. She looked at it. You made this for me? I was already up. That's not what I asked. Just take the coffee, Lily. She took it, wrapped both hands around it, looked out at the street. For a while they just sat there, the way they used to, two people occupying the same quiet without needing to fill it. The neighborhood was barely awake. A dog barked somewhere at the end of the block. The mountains in the distance had caught the first edge of light. I forgot about the mornings, she said. You mentioned forgetting things. This is a better kind of forgetting. She sipped the coffee, paused. You made it exactly right, I remembered. She looked at him then. Not a sideways look this time either. Direct, searching. You remembered how I take my coffee. It's not complicated. You've been making coffee for 5 years, Ethan. You probably make it 3 times a day. Why would you remember how I take it? He didn't have an answer to that. Or rather, he had one. But it was the kind of answer that changes the landscape of a conversation. And he wasn't ready for that landscape yet. So he said nothing. And she let him say nothing. And they sat on her porch steps in the early Colorado morning and drank their coffee. And the city came alive around them, the way it always had. Slow and golden. The first real conversation happened on a Tuesday night. Maya was at a friend's house. Lily had just finished a client call that had apparently gone sideways. Ethan heard her on the phone through the thin air between their porches. Not the words, just the tone which had shifted from professional to clipped, to something that sounded like controlled frustration. Then silence. Then, 15 minutes later, she appeared at his door. Do you have pasta, she said. He stared at her. What? Pasta. The dry kind in the box. I have sauce and I have wine, but I came back to an empty pantry and I've been on the phone for 2 hours. And I need carbohydrates or I'm going to become genuinely unpleasant. He opened the door wider. I have pasta. Thank God. She came in and went directly to his kitchen, like she'd been coming into his kitchen for years. She had. But also she hadn't. Not for 5 years. And there was something about the ease of it that caught in his throat. She opened 2 cabinets before finding the pasta, found a pot, filled it at the sink, and had it on the burner before he'd fully processed what was happening. "Hard day?" he asked. "Client wants me to redesign an entire brand identity in 3 days for the same price as a logo refresh." She set down the lid with more emphasis than necessary. "He's been reassessing the scope of the project every week for 6 weeks and expecting me to absorb the difference. Can you drop the client? I need the income while I'm getting settled here. Then you need to renegotiate." "I know I need to renegotiate." Ethan. "Right." He grabbed 2 glasses. "Wine, please." He poured while she found his cutting board bottom drawer. Left side, exactly where it had always been, and the tension in her shoulders started to drop in increments as the pasta water came to heat. He watched her navigate his kitchen and understood, in a way he hadn't been prepared for, that she fit in it. Not in an intrusive way. Not in a way that required anything. Just her presence made kitchens feel odd in the right way, like a room that had been waiting. "Tell me about the client," he said. "You don't want to hear about my client drama." "I'm asking, aren't I?" She looked at him sideways. Then she started talking. About the client, a boutique fitness brand, of all things. Which she delivered with a dry pause that made him snort, about the way the scope had grown from a simple logo to a full identity system, with brand guidelines and social templates and packaging concepts, all for the original quoted price, because the client kept framing each new addition as just a small thing. She was good at her job. He could tell by the precision with which she described the problem. The clarity of her frustration, the fact that she'd already identified 3 different approaches to the renegotiation and was simply deciding which one matched the relationship. He asked questions. She answered them. Somewhere in the middle, the pasta was done, and she found his colander without asking, and he found plates, and they ate standing at his counter because neither of them had moved toward the table. "Okay," she said after a silence that had passed from tense to comfortable. "Your turn." "My turn what?" "Hard week, you had one. I can tell." "I'm fine." "You said that in the car too." "Maybe it's true, Ethan. I've known you for 15 years. I'm fine means I am actively not talking about it." He was quiet for a moment. Then slowly he said, "The commercial contract. The big one. The client came back last week and told me they're cutting the second phase. Budget reasons. Which is real, the economy's doing what it's doing. But the second phase was 60% of the payment." "Ethan, we're okay," he said immediately. "I have savings. Maya's covered. It's a setback, not a catastrophe. I'd been counting on it. I told myself I wouldn't count on things I couldn't control. And then I counted on it." She set down her fork, looked at him. "You were allowed to count on it. You had a contract. Contracts change. That doesn't mean you did something wrong by believing it." He turned his glass in his hands. "I know that, do you?" He looked up. She held his gaze. "Because that's the thing about you, Ethan. You take the loss. You absorb it. You don't complain. And then somewhere in the process, you turn it into proof that you should have known better. When really, the lesson is just that sometimes things fall through. That's the whole lesson. There's no hidden moral about your character." He was quiet for a long time. "You haven't changed," he said finally. "I've changed a lot. Not that part." She looked at him with something complicated in her eyes. Not quite a smile. Not quite something sadder. "That part I kept," she said. After dinner, they moved to the porch. Not hers. The old wooden chairs were still there. The same ones she'd had when she left. Somehow surviving 5 years of Colorado weather. She had a string of lights along the railing that she'd put up the day she got back. Little warm lights that made the porch feel separate from the rest of the night. He sat in the chair he used to always take. She sat in hers. "Can I ask you something?" he said. Why did you really leave?" She was quiet for a moment. Turned the wine glass in her hands. "I told you why. You told me a why. I'm asking the real one." She exhaled slowly. "You're going to make me say it. You don't have to." "No." She shook her head slightly. "You're probably the one person who should hear it." Another pause. "I felt invisible here." He didn't move. "Not because of you. Not because of anything specific. Just the way I moved through the world here. I'd been here my whole life, and I'd built a very tidy little story where I was the nice, funny, helpful neighbor. The big woman who doesn't make anyone uncomfortable. The one who laughs at herself before anyone else can. The one who makes sure she's useful so that people will keep her around. She said it evenly, without self-pity, like she'd had years to understand it, and the understanding had settled into something she could hold, without flinching. I was exhausted by that story, and I didn't know how to put it down while I was still standing in the middle of it. So you went somewhere no one knew it. So I went somewhere no one knew it. She nodded. And I did something I'd never done. I just existed, without performing, without making myself smaller. I took up space. I dressed the way I wanted. I said what I thought. I disagreed with people. I didn't apologize for my size in a dozen tiny invisible ways I didn't even realize I'd been doing. She glanced at him. I know that probably sounds like a very small thing. It doesn't sound small. It felt enormous. She looked back at the street. And it worked. I got better. I built myself into someone I actually liked being. A pause. But then I got lonely. Because all the people I actually trusted were here. And my mom's knee was getting worse. And some mornings I'd wake up and think, what am I proving? Exactly. To yourself, he said. She turned to look at him. You weren't proving anything to anyone else, he said. You were proving it to yourself. That you could be somewhere new and still be you. That the story wasn't you, it was just a story. She stared at him. Then very quietly, yes. And now you know. And now I know. She looked at him for a long moment, searching, measuring, something in her eyes that he couldn't fully read but recognized somehow. The way you recognize a piece of music you haven't heard in years. Why didn't you ever say any of this 5 years ago? I didn't understand it 5 years ago. But you understand it now. I understand it now. They sat in the warm light of her porch, and the night settled around them, and he could feel something shifting in the careful distance. He'd been titanium, not breaking, just beginning to give, the way ice gives at the edges in early spring, before you can even call it melting. 2 weeks passed. They fell into something neither of them named. Morning coffee on the porch, sometimes his, sometimes hers. Dinner twice more, once when Maya was home and once when she wasn't. A Saturday, where he fixed her back gate and she made lunch and they ate on her porch and didn't go their separate ways until 5 in the afternoon, and neither of them commented on that. A hardware store run where she came along because she needed cabinet knobs and ended up in the lighting aisle for 45 minutes, asking him technical questions about wattage and lecturing him about something called biophilic design until he started laughing and couldn't stop. Maya noticed. You went to the hardware store with her. She needed cabinet knobs. And you needed? Wire nuts. Right. Maya speared a piece of broccoli with approximately the enthusiasm of someone being asked to spear a broccoli. She's nice. I know she's nice. Like she's actually nice. Not just polite. She talks to me like I'm a real person. You are a real person, Dad. You know what I mean. Most adults talk to me like I'm a concept. Like the concept of teenager. She asks me actual questions about actual things and then listens to the answers. He looked at his daughter across the table. Yeah, he said, she does that. Maya looked at him for a moment with those clear, assessing eyes. Are you going to do something about it? About what? About whatever this is. There's nothing to Dad. Maya, I'm just saying. She went back to her broccoli. She's not going to wait forever. People like her. People who figured out how to not need anyone. They're also the ones who leave cleanly when they decide it's time. I'm just noting that. He stared at his daughter, 14 years old, eating broccoli on a Tuesday night, like she hadn't just said one of the most perceptive things he'd heard in months. When did you get so smart, he said. I've always been this smart. You just don't listen. She said it without heat, matter of fact, and reached for her water. Just think about it. He thought about it. He thought about it on the job, running conduit through a commercial kitchen ceiling, hands steady while his mind turned the problem over the way he turned over electrical problems, tracing the current, finding where it was blocked. He thought about it driving home. He thought about it at 6 in the morning on his porch, holding coffee, That was the right temperature, because he'd stopped letting it go cold. The problem, as near as he could figure it, was this: he'd spent 5 years building a life on one principle. Don't want what you can't have, and be careful about deciding what falls into that category. After his marriage ended quietly, without drama, just two people who had grown into shapes that no longer fit together, he'd made a decision, not consciously but architecturally, in the way you rearrange a room without announcing it. He'd made himself self-sufficient, not lonely, not closed, just complete. Maya needed a father who wasn't distracted by longing. His work needed focus. His life needed to be enough, as it was, without depending on anything external to make it feel whole. And then Lily had come back, and his carefully arranged room was full of her voice, her coffee preference, her laugh, the way she talked to his daughter, the way she sat on her porch steps in wool socks at 6 in the morning, like she had nowhere to be and everywhere to belong. And the thing he hadn't accounted for, the thing that was keeping him up at night, was that he wasn't afraid of wanting her. He was afraid of what his wanting her would mean to her. Because he knew, from 2 weeks of paying attention, what Lily Morgan was afraid of. She was afraid of being chosen for the wrong reasons. She was afraid of being someone's comfortable decision, someone's good enough, someone's kind choice made from a surplus of decency, rather than an actual reckoning with desire. She deserved better than his silence, and she also deserved better than a declaration that hadn't been earned. He was still working out the distance between those two things. On a Thursday, 3 weeks after the airport, he knocked on her door at 7 in the evening, with no plan and no specific reason. She opened it in the middle of what was clearly a project. Her hair was up, in a knot secured by a pencil. She had her reading glasses on, which he'd never seen before, and there was a sketchbook under her arm. "What?" she said. Not unkindly, just what? "I thought we could go somewhere." She looked at him. "Go somewhere. Dinner. Somewhere we haven't been before. A place we don't have history with." "Why does that matter?" "Because I want to meet you somewhere new," he said. "Not as the neighbor. Not as the person who knew you before. I want to have dinner with the person you actually are right now, and pay attention the right way." She stared at him for a long moment. The sketchbook didn't move. Her expression was carefully neutral. What he'd learned was what she looked like when something mattered enough to be careful about. "That's a very deliberate thing to say," she said finally. I know what it implies." Another pause. She looked at him, over the tops of her glasses, in a way that was unexpectedly affecting. Then she took the pencil out of her hair, pushed her glasses up, and said, "Give me 15 minutes." The restaurant was a small Italian place across town that neither of them had been to before. They got a corner table. They ordered wine. They talked for 3 hours. Not about the neighborhood. Not about the past. About who they were now, what they cared about. What they'd changed their minds on. What they'd been wrong about. What they were still figuring out. She told him about a design project. She was passionate about an identity system for a nonprofit that served women coming out of transitional housing. The kind of work she did for minimal pay because it felt like it mattered. He told her about a decision he'd made 2 years ago to stop chasing bigger and bigger commercial contracts and focus excellent work at a scale he could sustain without losing himself. "That's not what most people do," she said. "No. Most people would have pushed, expanded, hired more, kept scaling. I know." He turned his wine glass. "But I'd seen what that did to people. In the first years after Sarah and I split, I was trying to prove something. Prove I could do it alone. Bigger jobs, better reputation, more income, and I was proving it. And Maya barely saw me. What changed? She got sick." He said it simply. "Just a regular sickness flu. Nothing serious. But I was in the middle of a job that I couldn't leave. And my mother came over and sat with her. And when I got home, Maya looked at me and said, 'It's okay, Dad, I know you're busy.' She was 11. And the way she said it," he stopped, shook his head slightly. "The way she said it. Like she'd already learned to manage around me." Lily set down her glass. "I scaled back the next month," he said. "I've never regretted it." She looked at him across the table, really looked, the way she had in the car, and on the porch, that direct, searching look. "You're a good father," she said. It was simple, not flattering, A statement of fact. I try. You don't have to qualify it. He looked at her. Okay. She smiled small, warm, real, and he thought, there it is. Not the confident entrance at the airport. Not the put-together woman on the porch. This small, unguarded smile over a corner table. This was who she was when she wasn't performing anything for anyone. Can I ask you something? He said. You always ask permission. Just ask. Why do you do that thing? He paused. When you say something real, when you tell me something that matters, you lean back. Just slightly. Like you're creating distance from the thing you just said. She was very still for a moment. That's very specific, she said. I pay attention. She looked at her wine glass. Then because if I stay forward, if I stay close to it, and then the other person doesn't receive it right, I can feel it. The rejection. Immediately and completely. She said it calmly. If I lean back, I've already created a little distance. It hurts less. Do you do it with everyone? She looked up. Not as much as I used to. He held her gaze and didn't lean back. They walked out of the restaurant at 10 o'clock and stood on the sidewalk in the cold October air, their breath visible, the city quiet in the specific way it gets quiet after 10 on a weekday. She had her coat wrapped around her, and she was looking at him with that calm, assessing expression he was beginning to understand was simply what she looked like when she was present. This was good, she said. It was. The new place thing. That was a good idea, yeah. She tilted her head. Ethan. Yeah. You still haven't answered my question. He knew which question she meant. The one from the airport. The one he'd deflected with you. Look good. I know, he said. You don't have to, she said. I was half joking when I asked it. Were you? She was quiet. Because you asked it like you meant it, he said. And I think you did. She held his gaze. The air between them was cold and very still. Maybe, she said finally. He took one step toward her, just one. Measured, intentional. Yeah, he said quietly. I missed you. I missed you the whole time, and I spent 5 years calling it something else because I didn't know what to do with it, and I still don't know exactly what to do with it. But I missed you. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, That's the most honest thing you've said to me since I got back. I know. Don't stop doing that. I won't. She held his gaze for another beat, and he could see the effort it cost her to stay forward, to not lean back, to let the thing land. Then she said, quietly, I missed you too. Colorado is beautiful, but it was missing someone in it who knew me. The city held its breath. Neither of them moved for a moment. Then she said, Take me home. And he said, yeah. And they walked back to his truck in the cold October night, close enough that their shoulders brushed, and neither of them moved away. The morning after their dinner, Ethan woke up at 5:43 and lay in the dark staring at the ceiling and understood, with complete clarity, that he had made things significantly more complicated. Not bad. Not wrong. Just complicated. The kind of complicated that comes from saying true things out loud to someone who matters, and then having to live in the same neighborhood as the consequences. He said it. He actually said it. I missed you. I missed you the whole time. He sat up, rubbed his face, and went to make coffee. He was standing at the counter when his phone buzzed. 6:02 in the morning. He looked at the screen. Lily, a text. 4 words, you made it weird. He stared at it. Then slowly he started typing. Did I? The 3 dots appeared immediately. She was already awake, already on her phone, which meant she hadn't slept either. And that information did something specific to his chest that he chose not to examine too closely. You know you did, she wrote back. I've been awake since 4 trying to decide how to act normal around you. He leaned against the counter. Typed, and what did you decide? A pause. Longer this time. Then I decided to tell you it's weird so that we can acknowledge it's weird and then move past it. Very efficient. I'm a very efficient person. You are. He wrote, Is it workings? Then, ask me in a week. He set his phone down and looked out the window at the dark Colorado morning and felt not quite happy. Not quite nervous, something in between, that didn't have a clean name. Something alive. He picked the phone back up and typed, Coffee, your porch. 20 minutes. She sent back a single period, which he had learned, in 3 weeks, was her version of yes, when she didn't want to admit she was saying yes. He made 2 cups. Extra dark, 2 sugars, splash of oat milk. He remembered. He walked across the lawn in the dark, and she was already on the steps, wrapped in a blanket over her coat, looking like someone who had given up on sleep and made peace with it. She looked at him when he came up the walk. She looked at the 2 cups. She looked back at him. "You're going to be insufferable about this, aren't you?" "About what?" "About being the kind of person who says the right thing and then shows up the next morning with coffee." "I was already making coffee, Ethan." "Lily." She took the cup, wrapped her hands around it. "Sit down before I say something I regret." He sat. The sky was just beginning to lighten at the edges, that particular Colorado pre-dawn that goes from black to a deep blue-gray before it concedes to color. She was looking at the street. He was looking at her profile. "I'm not going to pretend last night didn't happen," he said. "I'm not asking you to. I just want to make sure you know that." She turned and looked at him. In the half-dark, her eyes were very direct. "What I need you to understand," she said carefully, "is that I'm not doing this the way I used to do things, where I decide someone is good and I make myself available and I wait to see if they choose me." She paused. "I don't wait anymore. I either belong somewhere or I don't. And if I don't, I leave cleanly. I've gotten very good at leaving cleanly." "I know," he said. "Do you? That's why I said what I said last night. Because your version of leaving cleanly is very good and very final, and I didn't want to wait until you were already at the door." She studied him for a long moment. A muscle moved in her jaw. Then she looked back at the street. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay? Okay, I heard you." She sipped her coffee. "Now stop being earnest for 5 minutes or I'm going to have feelings before 7 a. And that is not a schedule I'm prepared for." He almost smiled. "Noted." They sat in silence. A good silence, the kind that had weight without pressure. Then she said, without looking at him, "I made a rule when I came back." "What rule?" "No falling into old patterns. No pretending we're the same people we were. No assuming that proximity means something. I've seen too many people come back to their hometown and just collapse back into who they used to be. Like no time passed. Like they didn't grow." She paused. "I didn't go through 5 years of building myself back up to collapse back into the version of Lily who made herself small, so other people would be comfortable. I know that. Then you know that what I'm saying is if this is something, it has to be something new. Not based on nostalgia. Not based on who we used to be to each other. Because who we used to be to each other was good. But it wasn't this." He was quiet for a moment. The sky was getting lighter. "What was it?" "You were my neighbor," she said, "and I was the woman next door who had feelings she didn't examine too closely because the math never felt like it worked in her favor." The words landed quietly. He felt them. "The math," he repeated. "You were a single father with your whole life rebuilt around your daughter. You didn't need complicated. I was." She stopped. "I was me. And I'd heard enough casual opinions about women like me to know how those calculations tend to go." He turned to look at her fully. "What calculations?" "You know what calculations." "Say it." She met his eyes. "The ones where a man is kind to a plus-size woman because he's a decent person. And somewhere between decency and desire is a gap that nobody says out loud, but everybody feels. The ones where you wonder, is he actually seeing me? Or is he just being good?" She held his gaze without flinching. "I spent 5 years learning that I am not required to minimize that question. I'm allowed to ask it. I'm allowed to need an answer." Ethan was quiet for a moment. "Then ask it." She looked at him. "What?" "Ask me directly. Right now. What you actually want to know." She looked at him for a long time in the early morning light. He could see her deciding, the back and forth, behind her eyes. The part of her that still leaned away, the part that was learning not to. Then she said quietly, "Do you see me? Not who I was. Not who you remember, me this. The way I actually am. Do you look at me and see someone you want, or someone you feel like you should be kind to?" He didn't look away. "I see you," he said. "And I'm going to keep showing you that because I know one answer in one morning isn't enough. But yes, I see you." She held his gaze. Something in her face shifted, not relief exactly, but something moving underneath it, like a foundation settling. "Okay," she said again. Softer this time. "Okay," he said. Finished their coffee as the sky went gold. 3 days after that conversation, Lily did something that surprised him. She called him at 2 in the afternoon on a Wednesday, while he was elbow-deep in a panel box at a commercial property on the east side, and said, "I need you to come somewhere with me Saturday morning. Early. Don't ask questions," he said. "What time?" she said. 6, he said. "That's not morning, that's the middle of the night," she said. 6 a.m. is morning, Ethan. I will not be debated on this. He said he'd be ready. Saturday at 5:58, she knocked on his door. She was in hiking boots and a heavyweight fleece and carrying 2 thermoses and a brown paper bag and looking like a woman with a plan. He came out in his jacket and she handed him a thermos without preamble and started walking toward her car. "Where are we going?" he said, catching up. "I found a trail. Above Boulder. I used to go when I was in college and I haven't been back, and I want to go, and I don't want to go alone." "Why not alone?" She glanced at him sideways as she unlocked the car. "Because I went everywhere alone for 5 years, and I'm experimenting with not doing that." He got in the passenger seat. "I'm the experiment. You're the data point." "Yes." He looked at her. She was already putting the car in reverse, checking mirrors with the focused, no-nonsense energy she brought to everything practical. "I'm honored," he said. "You should be." She pulled out of the driveway. "I made egg sandwiches." The trail was 40 minutes out of the city, early enough that the parking area was nearly empty when they arrived. The air was colder at elevation, real cold, the kind with teeth, and the trail wound up through pine and scrub oak toward a ridge that Lily clearly remembered because she walked it with a specific, purposeful certainty that told him she'd been here before in her mind 100 times since she left. They didn't talk much on the way up. Just moved. The way you move through something physical when the point isn't conversation but presence, the shared effort. The same breath, the same cold air. He stayed beside her on the wider sections and behind her on the narrow ones, and noticed, without pointing it out, that she set a pace that was real and didn't apologize for it. About halfway up, she stopped at a flat rock that jutted out over a drop that opened the view all the way to the plains. She sat. He sat beside her. She handed him the paper bag, and they ate their egg sandwiches with the specific satisfaction of people who have earned a meal through cold air and elevation. After a while, she said, "I used to come up here when things got heavy, when I needed to remember that the world was bigger than whatever I was making it." "What were you making it?" "Small." She looked out at the view. "I had a very small life for a long time. Not physically, I know how that sounds. Coming from me, but internally. I made myself fit into the space I thought I was allowed. Job apartment. Weekends. Nice enough, safe enough." She took a sip from her thermos. "And then someone said something to me, about 3 years ago, that I couldn't stop thinking about." "What did they say?" "It was a therapist," she said. "Lily, you're so focused on whether you deserve the space you're in that you've never stopped to ask if the space deserves you." She said it evenly. "I went home that night and I cried for about an hour, and then I started renegotiating every single thing about my life." He was quiet for a moment. "That's a hard sentence to sit with." "It's the truest thing anyone's ever said to me." She looked at him. "Does that make sense to you?" The feeling of being so focused on justifying your presence that you forget to evaluate whether the situation is worth your presence. He thought about it. Really thought. "Yeah," he said, "after Sarah and I split. I spent 2 years trying to prove I deserved to be Maya's primary parent. To myself, to the school, to the neighborhood, to anyone who looked at a single father and thought it was a temporary situation. I was so busy proving the right to be there that I stopped asking if the way I was doing it was actually working." She nodded slowly. "And then you scaled back. And then I scaled back." She looked at him with that expression. The one that said she was filing something away. "We're kind of the same, you know. The way we operate." "How do you mean?" "We both decided to restructure everything around what actually mattered. You for Maya, me for myself." She paused. "The difference is you had someone to restructure for. It's easier when you have someone. Doing it just for yourself it's necessary. But it's lonely." He looked at her. "You did it anyway. I did it anyway. That's not a small thing, Lily." She turned to look at him fully. Her cheeks were red from the cold. Her eyes were clear. She looked completely, simply like herself, no performance, no management, no maintained distance. "You're doing the thing again," she said. "What thing?" "Where you say the exactly right thing, and I have to decide what to do with it." "What are you going to do with it?" She looked at him for a moment. Then she stood up, brushed crumbs off her fleece, and held out her hand. "Finish the trail," she said. "Come on." He took her hand. She let go when the path narrowed. But she'd offered it first. And he thought about that the whole way up. The week that followed moved fast. Too fast. Ethan had back-to-back jobs, 2 residential rewires and a service panel replacement that ran 2 days over because of permits, and he barely saw her. A text here. A wave across the driveway. One evening where he came home late, and her porch light was on, and he almost knocked and then didn't because it was 9:30, and he'd been in someone's attic for 4 hours, and he smelled like insulation. But on Thursday she texted, "Dinner tonight? My place. I'm trying a recipe." He texted back in 30 seconds. "What time?" 7. "Don't come early, I will have stress." "I'll come at 7, and if you offer to help, I will hand you a spatula and immediately regret inviting you. I'm good at following instructions. You're an electrician. You're good at making decisions. Different skill set." He laughed out loud in the cab of his truck, alone, and then looked around like someone had caught him. He showed up at 7 with wine and without offering to help. She opened the door in an apron over a soft blue sweater, hair up, and the apartment smelled like garlic and something, roasting and warmth, in a way that was very specific and hit him somewhere below rational thought. "You look," he started. "Don't," she said, but she was smiling. "Come in." The recipe was a braised short rib situation that she'd clearly been working on for hours, served with something creamy and roasted vegetables. And it was, without qualification, one of the best things he'd ever eaten. He told her so, and she waved it off, and then told him the specific steps she'd changed from the original recipe, which she would not have done if she didn't care that he appreciated it. Maya had texted him at 6:30. "Are you at Lily's tonight?" He'd written back, "Going over for dinner." "Why?" she'd replied. "No reason, have fun." With the emphasis. He'd put his phone in his pocket. They ate at her small dining table with the candles she'd lit, which, she explained immediately, were just because she liked candles in a way that suggested she had rehearsed explaining this, which he found endearing and did not say. They talked about her work. The nonprofit project was expanding. She'd been brought on for a full brand system, and Maya's science project on water systems in drought conditions. And somewhere in the second glass of wine, the conversation moved sideways into something more personal. "Tell me about your marriage," she said. Not demanding, just asking. Like it was something she was allowed to ask, which it was. He was quiet for a second. "What do you want to know?" "What happened?" "The real version," he considered. "We got married young. We were good together, in the way that young people are good together when their lives are still open enough that they haven't figured out who they're actually going to be. And then we figured it out. And we'd grown into different people who wanted different things." He turned his glass. She wanted to move. Always somewhere else, something bigger, more possibility. "I wanted to stay, build something here. Raise Maya in a place that had roots, I guess, structure. Neither of you were wrong." "No. That's the hard part. We weren't wrong. We just stopped being right for each other." How did Maya take it? She was 7. She took it the way 7-year-olds take things, with a lot of very specific, concrete questions about logistics. Who would be at school pickup? Where her room would be? Could she keep the dog? He paused. The dog was actually the first thing she asked about. Lily smiled. "Good priorities. She's always been practical." He looked at his glass. "She never fell apart about it. I was grateful for that. And I always wondered if she just didn't let herself. She's very good at deciding what needs to be held and what needs to be like her father." He looked up. Lily was watching him steadily. "You do that too. Decide what you're allowed to feel and set the rest aside." She said it without accusation, just observation. "You've been doing it since I got back. I can see you weighing things, measuring, deciding what's safe to put down. That sounds like a criticism." "It's not." She leaned her elbows on the table. Forward, not back. Forward. And he noticed. "It's just you're allowed to want things, Ethan. Complicated things. Inconvenient things. You don't have to ration it. He held her gaze. What if what I want is inconvenient for you? She didn't blink. Try me. The air between them changed. Not dramatically, no movie moment. No sudden music, just the specific quality of an air that has been carefully maintained at one temperature, shifting by a degree or two. His hands were on the table. Hers were on the table. Close. I want this, he said. Whatever this is. I want to figure out what it is. She didn't move. I know that's vague, he said. I know you said you don't wait anymore. I'm not asking you to wait. I'm asking you to. I know what you're asking, she said. Then what do you think? She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, very quietly, I think I've been sitting across from you for 3 weeks, making sure I wasn't just feeling what I wanted to feel, making sure it was real. She paused. And I think it's real. Something in his chest released that he hadn't realized he was holding. Okay, he said, okay. She looked down at her glass. Looked back up. But Ethan, I need you to understand something. If this, she gestured between them, goes wrong, if it turns out to be something other than what it feels like, right now, I can't stay next door. I've rebuilt myself too carefully to take that apart over a misunderstanding of what this is. I understand that, do you? Because you've been my neighbor for 15 years, and I need you to actually, Lily. His voice was quiet and direct. I understand. I'm not asking for a guarantee. I'm asking for a chance. He looked at her. Are we done negotiating? She held his gaze. Then a small, real smile started at the corner of her mouth. You're very calm about this. One of us has to be. She laughed, a real one. Sudden, startled out of her, and the tension broke cleanly and became something lighter and warmer. Fine, she said. Oh, chance. A chance, he agreed. She pointed at the empty serving dish. Do you want the last of it? Yes. Then go get it yourself. I cooked. He got up, and she watched him cross to the kitchen with an expression he caught in his peripheral vision. Something unguarded. Something pleased. She didn't quite put away fast enough. He brought back the dish. He didn't say anything about the expression, but he filed it. What happened next came from a direction neither of them expected. Maya had met Lily 3 times since her return, briefly. In the driveway, in passing, once at the kitchen table, when Lily had come over to borrow Ethan's staple gun. Normal encounters. Ordinary. Until the Saturday morning when Ethan was on a job and Maya texted Lily directly. He found out about it when he came home, and Maya was sitting at the kitchen table working on homework. And she said, without looking up, Lily and I got lunch. He stopped. What? She offered. I texted her. We went to that sandwich place on Morrison. It was good. Maya turned a page. She's really funny, you texted her. Is that a problem? No. I didn't know you had her number. I got it off your phone 3 weeks ago. Maya said it with perfect calm. He stared at his daughter. She still didn't look up. You got her number off my phone. For emergencies. What emergency did lunch represent? Now she looked up. Dad, I'm 14. I wanted to talk to her. She came back from being gone for 5 years. And you're whatever you are about her, and I thought it might be nice to form my own opinion. Is that a crime? He sat down across from her. What's your opinion? Maya put her pencil down. This was serious. Then, she only put down the pencil for things she'd decided to treat seriously. She asked me about the water systems project, she said. Not like small talk asked. She actually wanted to know about it. She asked me what angle I was taking and whether I'd considered the agricultural impact, and we ended up talking about it for like 40 minutes. He didn't say anything. And then I asked her about her work, Maya continued, and she showed me some of her projects on her phone. She designed this identity for a women's shelter, and it was Dad. It was genuinely beautiful. Like, I don't know anything about design, and I could tell it was beautiful. She explained how she made decisions about color, and she talked about the women the organization likes, yet she actually cared about them, not like they were a client. He nodded slowly. She's real, Maya said. It was the simplest summary possible, and the most complete. She's not performing anything. She's just real. She picked up her pencil. I think you should not mess this up. I appreciate the advice. I'm serious. I know you're serious. You put down the pencil. She almost smiled. Don't mess it up. He promised he would try. and he meant it more than he meant most things. The following Tuesday, he was in the middle of replacing a breaker at a residential job when his phone rang. Not Lily, not Maya. A number he recognized from 6 months ago, the commercial client who had cut the second phase of the contract. Glenn Harker. He almost didn't answer. He answered. Ethan. Glenn's voice was the same as always, businesslike, efficient, a man who treated every conversation like a meeting. Good news. The budget situation sorted itself out. We want to move forward on phase 2. Ethan stood in the middle of the panel room with the breaker still in his hand. We're looking at a start date in 6 weeks. Same scope as original. Full payment on the original terms. 6 weeks ago, this call would have been everything. It was a significant contract. Good money. Real work. I appreciate you calling, Glenn, he said. Can I get back to you tomorrow? A pause. Is there an issue? No issue. I just want to look at my schedule and make sure I can give you what you need. He kept his voice steady. I'll call you tomorrow morning. He hung up and stood very still for a moment. 6 weeks ago, he wouldn't have hesitated. He would have said yes before Glenn finished the sentence. He would have restructured everything around it. He would have told himself it was for Maya's future, for security, for all the solid and practical reasons that had nothing to do with the fact that saying yes meant 6 weeks of a workload that left no room for anything else. He thought about Lily on her porch steps in the early morning. He thought about the trail, above Boulder, her hand extended. He thought about what she'd said. You're allowed to want things, complicated things, inconvenient things. He went back to work and thought about it all afternoon. That evening, he told Lily about the call. They were walking just around the neighborhood, something that had become a default for evenings when neither of them had a specific plan. She listened without interrupting, hands in her coat pockets, watching the sidewalk. When he finished, she said, "What do you want to do?" "I don't know." "Yes, you do." He looked at her sideways. "I think I want to take it. The money is real and the work is good, but I want to take it with terms that protect my time. Not say yes and then absorb everything. Negotiate the schedule." "Have you ever negotiated your schedule with a client before?" "No." "Why not?" "Because I was always afraid they'd find someone who wouldn't." She nodded slowly. "And now?" "Now I think if the work is good and I'm good, the negotiation is reasonable. And if they won't take reasonable terms, then maybe they weren't the right client." She looked at him. "That is a thing I said to myself about 3 years ago about a different situation." A small pause. "It works. Did it work for you?" "Eventually." She smiled slightly. "The first time it felt terrifying. But it gets easier." He looked at her. "You know what's happening, right?" "What?" "We're giving each other advice about our own lives. We've been doing it all month." She thought about that. "Yeah," she said, "I noticed that. It's a good thing. I think so too." She glanced at him. "Call Glenn tomorrow. Tell him you'll do it, but the schedule has to be structured and protected. If he says no, you'll figure out the next thing. Okay?" "And Ethan?" "Yeah. Stop walking like you're carrying the contract on your back. It's just a decision." He straightened slightly, felt the held tension in his shoulders, and released it. "Right. Better," she said, and she reached out and briefly, lightly bumped her shoulder against his arm. Not a hug, not a grand gesture, just contact. Simple and warm. He kept walking and felt that contact for the rest of the block. 2 days later, something happened that cracked the foundation. He didn't know about it until after. He pieced it together from what Lily told him. Not immediately, not that night, but 3 days later when she told him all of it at once. And by then, the damage was already spreading under the surface, like a split in a wire hidden behind drywall. She had gone to her cousin Rachel's birthday gathering. A small thing, 12-15 people at a restaurant in the city. She hadn't seen most of Rachel's friends since, before she left, and she'd been cautious about it. But Rachel had asked specifically, and she'd decided to go. She'd worn the burgundy dress she'd bought in Portland. The one that fit her the way she wanted to be fit. That didn't apologize or minimize or perform anything. She'd been fine. She'd been good, even talking to people. Relaxed, feeling like herself. And then she'd overheard 2 people at the end of the bar. She didn't know them well. Friends of a friend. And they were talking about her. She told him what they said. She delivered it flatly, without emotion, because she'd already had 3 days of emotion in private, and what was left was the factual account. One of them had said, "She seems nice," and the other had said, "Sure, but you have to wonder about the guy she mentioned. The neighbor. Guys like that don't usually end up choosing girls like her. He's probably just being kind. Girls like her." She said those 3 words, and then she was quiet. Ethan didn't move. He was sitting across from her at her kitchen table, coffee untouched, and he was looking at her face, the controlled stillness of it, the precision with which she was holding herself together. And underneath that, visible to him now, in a way it wasn't at the beginning, the specific kind of pain that comes not from cruelty, but from recognition. From hearing the thing you'd almost stopped believing, said out loud by a stranger who didn't know they were saying it to the air that you were breathing. "Lily," he said, "I'm fine. You don't have to be fine. I know I don't have to be." She looked at him. Her jaw was set. "I'm telling you because you need to know. Not because I'm falling apart. I already did that part. Alone, before I decided to tell you. Now I'm just reporting." "Reporting," he repeated softly. "Don't look at me like that." "Like what?" "Like I'm something fragile. I'm not looking at you like that. You're doing the—" she gestured at his face, "thing. I'm listening to you." "That's the same face, Lily." He waited until she met his eyes. "Tell me the rest." She held his gaze. Then she looked at her coffee. "I left the party early. I came home. I sat on my porch for a while, and I thought about everything I've built, everything I changed about myself, all the work, and I thought—" She stopped. "What?" "I thought maybe I should stop before it gets worse." She said it quietly. "Not stop us specifically, or whatever this is, but stop expecting." She pressed her lips together. "Stop expecting to be chosen the way other women get chosen. Like it's a thing that happens automatically. Like I didn't have to earn it, or prove it, or wait to see if it held." He was quiet for a moment. Very quiet. Then he said, "Who were those people?" "It doesn't matter. I know it doesn't matter. Who were they, Ethan? I'm not going to do anything. I just want to know what kind of person says that in a public place about someone they barely know. The kind that exist everywhere," she said flatly. "The kind that always have. This is not a new situation. I've been navigating this my entire life." I know exactly what that conversation was. 2 people who looked at a plus-size woman looking comfortable and decided to explain her situation to each other. She looked at him steadily. "The problem isn't them. The problem is, I heard it at a moment when I was starting to let myself believe something, and it landed." He looked at her for a long time. He thought about everything she'd told him, carefully, in pieces. Over these weeks, the leaning back, the calculations, the years of apologizing in ways so small and habitual they'd become invisible. He thought about the trail above Boulder and her hand extended. And then he said with complete steadiness, "Do you believe what they said?" She was quiet. "Do you think I'm being kind? Is that what you think this is?" She met his eyes. "I don't know what to think when I hear something like that." "Then let me be very clear." He put his hands flat on the table, not reaching for her. "Just present, grounded. I have not been kind to you. I have been honest with you. Those are completely different things. Kind is bringing soup when someone is sick. What I have been is someone who cannot stop paying attention to you. Someone who remembers how you take your coffee, and why you leaned back when things matter, and what your face like when you're actually laughing, versus when you're performing a laugh for a room. That is not kindness. That is something else entirely." He paused. "And the people at that bar don't know what kind of person you are. They saw a size. They made an assumption. That assumption is completely wrong. And it has nothing to do with what is actually happening between us." She was very still. Her eyes were bright. "Say something," he said. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "You're doing it again." "Doing what?" "Saying the exact right thing. Then stop arguing with it." She laughed small, surprised, a little waterlogged, and pressed her fingers to the bridge of her nose. "I hate this," she said. "Not meaning it, I know. I don't mean it in a bad way. I know that too." She lowered her hand, looked at him. The brightness in her eyes hadn't gone away. "I'm not going to cry," she said. "You can if you want." "I don't want to." She straightened in her chair. I'm going to be annoying and practical instead. That sounds like you. It is me. She looked at him. Okay. I heard what you said. I'm not going to just pretend those people didn't exist, because they do and they will. But I heard you. That's enough, he said. Is it? For right now? Yeah. She nodded slowly. Then she reached across the table, not reaching for his hands, just pushing his coffee cup toward him. Drink that. It's getting cold. He wrapped his hands around the mug. She wrapped her hands around hers. They sat across from each other in her kitchen in the afternoon light, and neither of them said anything else for a while, and the quiet between them was the kind that holds rather than distances. The kind that means something has moved through the room and left it changed. He didn't know, sitting there, that the thing moving through the room was not over. That the words from the bar would settle in, Lily, like sediment invisible until disturbed. That in 3 days she would wake up at 4 in the morning and stare at the ceiling and do the calculation she'd promised herself she'd stopped doing. That she would quietly and methodically begin thinking about whether she should leave. He didn't know any of that yet. What he knew was the weight of her hands around her mug, and the particular stillness of a woman who is deciding what to trust, and the absolute certainty that he was not going to let her disappear into that decision alone. She didn't tell him she was planning to leave. That was the thing that stayed with Ethan afterward, the fact that Lily had made the decision, built the whole architecture of it, packed the logic neatly into place, and hadn't said a single word. She'd sat across from him in her kitchen 3 days after the birthday party, hands around her coffee mug, looking steady and present and like herself, and she'd already been halfway gone. He found out on a Thursday morning, not from her, from Maya. His daughter came downstairs at 7:15 with her backpack over one shoulder and a look on her face that he recognized immediately, the particular expression she wore when she knew something she was deciding whether to say. She poured herself orange juice, stood at the counter, and said without preamble, "Lily has boxes." Ethan looked up from his coffee. "What?" "I saw them through her window when I was leaving for the bus yesterday. Moving boxes. Flat ones, stacked against the wall. The kind you get from the hardware store." Maya set down her glass. "She's packing, Dad." He was very still. "Maybe they're from before," he said. "Maybe she never finished unpacking." Maya looked at him. Just looked at him. The way she looked at him when he was saying something she was too polite to call stupid. "She's been here 6 weeks. Those boxes were not there last week." She picked up her backpack. "I'm just telling you what I saw." She left for school. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, with his coffee going cold for the second time in 6 weeks, and this time he didn't stare at the ceiling. He picked up his phone and called Lily. It rang 4 times. Then her voicemail, her voice, calm and professional. "You've reached Lily Morgan. Leave a message." He hung up, sat for 30 seconds, called again. This time she picked up on the second ring. "Ethan." Her voice was careful. "Too careful. Are you leaving?" A pause. Long enough to be its own answer. "Were you going to tell me?" He said. "I was going to She stopped. "Yes, I was going to tell you. When? Soon." "That's not an answer." "I know." He heard her exhale. "Can we not do this on the phone?" "Come over." "Ethan, Lily. Come over, right now, please." Another pause, then, "Give me 10 minutes." She knocked on his door at 11 minutes past. She was in her fleece and jeans, and her hair was down, and she was holding herself with that particular controlled stillness he now understood as the external architecture of internal war. He opened the door wide, and she came in and sat at his kitchen table, the same chair she always took, and she put both hands flat on the table in front of her, like she was preparing to say something that required physical anchoring. He sat across from her. He didn't speak first. He'd learned that with Lily, silence given willingly was different from silence imposed, and right now he needed her to choose her words without pressure. She looked at the table, then at him. "I'm not running away," she said. "I want to be clear about that." "Okay, I've thought about this carefully. This is not a panic decision. How long have you been thinking about it?" She pressed her lips together. "Since the party." 3 days. She had been thinking about leaving for 3 days, while sitting on his porch, drinking coffee, and telling him she'd heard him. while letting him say the right things and watching them land and nodding and smiling and building her exit at the same time. He didn't say any of that. He kept his face steady. "Tell me the real reason," he said. "I told you the real reason. You told me about the people at the bar. That's what started it. Tell me the real reason underneath that." She was quiet for a long moment. Then slowly, "Because I've been here before. Here where this feeling." She looked at her hands. "This specific feeling of thinking something is real. Of letting myself believe that time is different. That I've changed enough. That the person seeing me is actually seeing me and not some projection of what they think they should feel about the nice woman next door." She looked up. "I've been wrong before, Ethan. More than once. And every time I was wrong, I had to rebuild from further down. You think you're wrong about me. I think I don't know. And not knowing is..." She stopped. "Try it again. When you don't know, and you stay, and then you find out you were wrong, the rebuild is longer each time. I'm not sure I have another long rebuild in me." He looked at her. "So you'd rather leave before you find out?" "I'd rather leave while I can still do it cleanly." Her voice was steady. "While it's still a choice and not a collapse." "That's not protection," he said quietly. "That's preemptive loss." She flinched. Just slightly. One small movement, quickly controlled. "Maybe. Not maybe. You're making the worst outcome happen yourself so you don't have to risk the other person doing it." He kept his voice even. Not soft, because soft would let her reframe it. "You're packing boxes because two people at a bar said something cruel about someone they'd never met. That's not..." "Lily." He waited. "Is that not what's happening?" She was very still. He could see her working through it, the part of her that wanted to reframe the decision as logical, controlled, healthy, the sophisticated exit of a woman who had learned her own limits. And underneath that, the part she was trying not to let him see. "I'm scared," she said finally. Small, flat, real. "I know, I'm really scared. I know that too. I've built so much." Her voice stayed controlled, but her eyes didn't. "I changed everything about how I move through the world. I stopped apologizing. I stopped making myself small. I stopped believing that I had to earn my space." She pressed her fingers together. "And then I came back here, and I let you in, and it felt like being human, in a way I haven't felt in years. And that is terrifying. Because the more real it gets, the more there is to lose." Ethan looked at her across the table for a moment. Then he stood up. Not dramatically, just stood, came around the table, and sat down in the chair beside her instead of across from her. Close, she watched him do it with wide, uncertain eyes. "Can I tell you something?" he said. "You're going to tell me something, whether I say yes or not." "Probably." He turned toward her. "I have been careful my entire adult life after Sarah. After building everything alone. After watching myself almost miss my daughter's childhood trying to prove I could handle everything. I have been very, very careful about what I want, and who I let in and what I count on." He paused. "And then you came through those airport doors and stood there, looking like someone who had walked through fire and come out knowing exactly who she was. And something in me stopped being careful." She was watching him, barely breathing. "I am not a man who says things I don't mean," he said. "I am not being kind to you. I am not feeling sorry for you. I am not choosing you because you're familiar or comfortable or safe. I am choosing you because you are the most real person I have been near in 5 years, and my life is genuinely better with you in it. And those are facts, not feelings, and I need you to hear them as facts." She was quiet for a moment. "Then, why did you sit over here?" "Because I was tired of talking across a table at you." Something shifted in her face. The architecture of control held, but something behind it moved. "You're very irritating," she said. "I've been told. You say exactly the right thing, and I can't argue with it, and I hate that." "Good. Then stop arguing." She looked at him. "Close now. No table between them. When you stay, if..." She held his gaze. "I need you to understand that I can't do this the way I've done things before. I can't be the woman who waits quietly and makes herself available and measures her worth by how much she's chosen. That version of me doesn't exist anymore, I know. I need you to show up. Actually show up. Not just when it's comfortable, I will. And if something changes..." "Lily." He held her gaze with complete steadiness. "I know what I'm asking for. I know what I'm offering. I am not confused about either one." She looked at him for a long time. He watched the war move through her, visible now. Not hidden. All the competing things fighting for position. The fear. The desire. The hard-won wisdom and the wound underneath it. The woman she'd built, and the woman who was still sometimes afraid she'd built her on sand. Then she exhaled. Slow and full. And something in her shoulders, in the set of her jaw, in the precise angle at which she'd been holding herself, released. "The boxes are from before," she said quietly. "I didn't actually order new ones." He stared at her. "I opened the old ones," she said. "I looked at them. I thought about it. But I didn't order new boxes." A pause. Maya saw the old ones. He understood what she was telling him. That she had stood at the edge and looked down and pulled herself back before he even called. That she had needed to know she had the choice and had chosen to stay. On her own terms before he showed up. "Lily, I know," she said. "I know what it means." She looked at him. "It means I'm terrified and I'm staying anyway." He reached out and put his hand over hers on the table. She looked down at it. Then she turned her hand and held it back. Quiet, warm, real. They sat like that for a long time. They didn't talk about the boxes again. What they talked about, over the next hour, was what came next, not dramatically, not with ceremony, but practically, the way two grounded people discuss a thing that matters. She told him she needed to keep her independence, her work, her mornings alone. He told her he needed the same. She told him she wasn't interested in performing a relationship for the neighborhood's benefit, that what happened between them was theirs and not a public announcement. He told her he'd never wanted a performance from her. She said she knew, but she needed to say it. He said she could say anything she needed to say. Then she looked at him and said, "You have to tell Maya." "Maya already knows." Lily blinked. "What?" "She told me about the boxes this morning. She also told me she thinks I shouldn't mess this up." She was very direct about it. A startled laugh broke out of her, genuine. Unguarded. "She's 14. She's practical. She got that from you. She gets nothing from me. She's entirely her own person, and she'll tell you so." Lily was smiling now, a real one, reaching her eyes. "I love that kid. Don't tell her that. She'll be insufferable. She's already insufferable. It's a gift." He looked at her. She was smiling and her hands were still warm in his, and the kitchen was full of ordinary morning light, and he thought, This is what it's supposed to feel like. Not perfect. Not easy. Just real. The weeks that followed were different from the ones before. Not louder, the change wasn't visible from the street. Lily's car was still in her driveway. His truck was still in his. They still had separate lives, separate rhythms, separate mornings. But the careful distance was gone, and in its place was something that felt like an actual shared world. She met him for lunch on job sites twice. Bagged sandwiches, eaten in the cab of his truck, talking about whatever was in front of them, her client project, his permit delays, Maya's science presentation, a book one of them had read. She texted him things that made him laugh at unpredictable hours. He started saving things during his day observations. Small stories, strangers he'd talked to, because he was going to tell her later, and knowing that made the day feel different. Maya, for her part, managed the whole situation with the composure of a person who had predicted the outcome, and was graciously declining to say so. She started having dinner with Lily once a week, without coordinating with Ethan at all. He found out about the third one when he came home at 6:30, and there was a note on the counter. "At Lily's. There's pasta in the pot, don't wait up." She was 14. He absolutely waited up. But he ate the pasta, and he appreciated the note, and he acknowledged, privately, that his daughter had made more decisive social moves in 6 weeks than he had in 6 months. Then came the night that changed the shape of everything. It was a Friday, 7 weeks after the airport. Lily had a video call with a difficult client that was supposed to end at 6 and was still going at 7:45. And when it finally ended, she was exhausted and wrung out, and she knocked on his door without texting first, which she never did. He opened it, and she walked straight past him to the couch and sat down and put her face in her hands. He closed the door, went to the kitchen, came back with 2 glasses of water and sat beside her, and didn't say anything. After a moment she lowered her hands. Her face was tired in a real way, the specific exhaustion of someone who has been performing competence for 2 hours while genuinely upset. And he told me my design wasn't sophisticated enough, she said, that the work didn't match what he'd expected. Is he right? No. Flat, immediate, certain. It's the best work I've done in 2 years. It matches the brief precisely. What happened is he showed it to his wife, and his wife has opinions about colors, and now I'm supposed to reverse engineer his wife's taste from second-hand descriptions. What are you going to do? I'm going to revise the proposal to add a revision cap and a scope change fee. Send it to him Monday morning, and if he doesn't agree, I'm going to walk. She paused. Which I can do because I have 3 other clients and my savings are stable, and I spent 5 years building a practice that didn't depend on any one person's approval. He looked at her. Okay, I know. I know the answer. I just needed to say it out loud to a person. She looked at him. Is that all right? You can say anything out loud to me. She held his gaze. I know, she said softly. That's still new. I'm still getting used to it. They sat on his couch, the quiet kind of sitting that had become its own language between them. Then she said without looking at him, Can I stay for a while? You can stay as long as you want. She leaned back, exhaled, stayed. An hour later, Maya came home from her friend's house, walked into the living room, found them both on the couch with the television on at low volume, and said, Oh good, you're both here. I need someone to quiz me on the French Revolution. Lily sat up. I know the French Revolution. I know you do, Maya said, already dropping into the armchair across from them with her notes. Dad's knowledge cuts out at World War II. That's not, Ethan started. The French Revolution, Lily said, reaching for Maya's notes. Okay, let's go. And that was how they spent the Friday evening, Maya drilling dates and causes and consequences. Lily asking follow-up questions that made Maya think harder than the questions on the test. Ethan making popcorn and getting approximately 40% of the answers right and being told so with cheerful frequency. He sat in his own living room and watched the two of them go back and forth with the easy fluency of people who already understood each other. And he felt something so complete and uncomplicated that it almost scared him with its simplicity. He had wanted this for a long time without knowing what to call it. The twist came on a Saturday 16 days later. Not from Lily. Not from inside the careful new world they'd been building. From outside it, fast and without warning, the way the things that test structures always arrive. He got a call at 8 in the morning from his ex-wife, Sarah. She called maybe twice a year. The calls were always civil. They had gotten good at civil, had worked at it deliberately for Maya's sake, and they were usually brief. This one was not brief. I want to talk about Maya, Sarah said. She was in Boston now, had been for 2 years, with a new partner and a life that looked, from the outside, like it fit her well. I've been thinking about it for a while, and I want to propose something. What kind of something? I want to discuss her spending her junior year with me. Ethan was standing in his kitchen. He put down his coffee mug. What? She'll be 16. It's a good age for a change of environment. Boston has excellent schools. There's a science program at her school here that specifically, Sarah. His voice was very quiet. Maya lives here. I know where Maya lives, Ethan. I'm proposing a year. Not permanent. A year is not a small thing to a 16-year-old. A year with her mother is also not a small thing. A pause. I've been talking to her. She's open to it. Everything in him went very still. You've been talking to Maya about this. She's my daughter. You talked to her about a major life change. Before you talked to me, I wanted to know how she felt before I brought it to you. I didn't want to Sarah. He stopped, took a breath. We can talk about this. But you don't make plans with Maya about where she lives without including me. That's not how this works. I'm not making plans. I'm proposing a conversation. Then let's have the conversation. All 3 of us. Together. Fine, he said. He hung up and stood in his kitchen for a moment and felt the specific sensation of the ground shifting under something he'd believed was stable. He'd built his whole life around the axis of Maya, her school, her schedule, her stability, his physical presence in the same house at the end of every day. The idea of a year without that of coming home to a house that was just his opened a space inside him. he didn't have language for. He called Lily. She picked up immediately. "Hey, are you free?" Something in his voice told her. Her tone changed. "What happened?" he told her. Standing at his kitchen window, watching the morning light on his driveway, telling her what Sarah had said word by word. She listened without interrupting, which was one of the things about her he had come to count on the way you count on solid ground. When he finished, she said, "How are you?" "I don't know yet. That's honest. It's too early to be anything else." He leaned against the counter. She said, "Maya is open to it." "Have you talked to Maya?" "Not yet. She's still asleep." "Do you want me to—" She stopped herself. "Actually, this is yours. You should talk to her first. Alone. I'll be here when you're done." He closed his eyes briefly. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Just talk to your daughter." He went upstairs and knocked on Maya's door at 9 o'clock, and she said, "Come in," with the voice of someone who had been awake for a while and was not surprised by the knock. She was sitting up in bed with her phone face down, on the blanket, phone face down, which meant she'd been expecting this, which meant Sarah had already texted her this morning. He sat in the chair at her desk. "Your mom called." "I know." Maya looked at him. Not defensive, not apologetic, just very 14. Very direct, very much her own person. "She told you about Boston." "She did." He kept his voice even. "Were you going to tell me?" "I was still deciding how I felt about it." "And how do you feel about it?" She was quiet for a moment. Really quiet, not performing thought. Actually doing it. "I don't know," she said finally. "I miss her. I don't say it because it feels complicated, and I don't want to make things complicated for you. But I miss her." "You're allowed to miss her." "I know." She looked at him. "I'm also not going anywhere I don't want to go." "So you're still deciding?" "I'm still deciding." She paused. "Is that okay?" He looked at his daughter, 14 years old. Dark-haired, wearing his old Rockies sweatshirt, sitting in her room in the house they'd built together out of the years they'd navigated alone. He thought about how much of his life had been organized around this room. This person. This responsibility that had become the most real thing he'd ever held. "It's okay," he said. It cost him something. He said it anyway, because it was true. "Whatever you decide, we'll figure it out." Maya looked at him for a long time. Then she said, "Is Lily part of the figuring out?" He blinked. "What? I mean, if I went to Boston for a year, would Lily still be here?" She said it carefully, precisely, measuring his face. "Because that changes the math. A little." He stared at his daughter. "Are you asking if I'd be okay?" "I'm asking if you'd be okay in a way that involves more than just, 'I'm fine.'" He thought about that. About Lily on her porch in the early morning. About her hand on the trail above Boulder. About her sitting on his couch with Maya's French Revolution notes, asking follow-up questions. About the boxes she hadn't ordered. About everything she'd built and everything she'd stayed for. "Yeah," he said quietly. "She'd still be here." Maya nodded. Slowly, like something had been confirmed. Then she said, "Okay. I need to think. Take your time. Don't be sad about it while I'm thinking. It makes it harder." He almost smiled. "I'll do my best." He went back downstairs and sat at the kitchen table and texted Lily. "Done, she's thinking." Lily texted back within seconds. "Come over. I'll make breakfast." He sat for a moment. Then he stood up, got his jacket, and went next door. She opened the door before he knocked. She'd heard him coming across the lawn. She looked at his face, read everything in it in about 3 seconds, and stepped back to let him in. "Eggs?" she said. "Yeah." She went to the kitchen. He sat at her table. She started cracking eggs with the focused, calm competence she brought to everything physical. And the ordinary domestic sound of it, the pan, the butter, the low heat did something to the tightness in his chest. "She misses her mother," he said. "Of course she does. I've never," he stopped. Started again. "I've never let myself fully think about that. The missing her mother piece. Because the easier story was that we'd built everything we needed right here." "That's not a lie," Lily said, not turning from the stove. "You did build everything she needed here. And she can also miss her mother. Both are true." "I know. Do you know? Actually know? Not just say?" He was quiet for a moment. "I'm working on the actually knowing part." She nodded. Kept cooking. "Can I say something that might be uncomfortable?" "Yes. If she goes to Boston for a year, She paused, choosing carefully. That doesn't mean you failed. It means you raised a kid confident enough to want things and go after them. That is the whole job. He looked at the back of her head. The way she was standing easy, certain, saying a true thing, and letting it be what it was without dressing it up. He thought about what she'd said weeks ago. You're allowed to want things. You're going to be really good at this, he said. She turned around, looked at him. At what? At being here. For her. For us. He held her gaze. I don't say things I don't mean, Lily. I already told you that. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned back to the stove. Her voice, when she spoke, was careful and small and very real. I know you don't. A pause. That's the thing I'm still getting used to. She plated the eggs, brought them to the table, sat across from him. They ate together in her kitchen in the Saturday morning light, and the weight of the conversation with Maya and Sarah was still there, real. Not resolved, not erased, but it was sitting alongside something else now. Something that held weight of a different kind. Solid and warm and chosen. He looked across the table at her. She looked back. We're going to be okay, he said. She didn't say yes immediately. She looked at him with that clear, direct, searching look, the one that didn't accept shortcuts. Then she said, yeah, I think we are. That afternoon, he got a text from Maya. Not a call. A text. She always texted the things that required courage. I told Mom I need more time before I decide. And I told her she needs to talk to you before she talks to me again about big things. She said, okay, I think she meant it. He read it twice. Then he typed, that was well done. Maya, I know, I get it from you. He stared at that for a moment, something rising in his chest that he didn't have a name for, and didn't need one. Then he typed, you get it from yourself. He paused and added, but I'll take partial credit. Maya sent back a single laugh emoji, which was her version of warmth. He put his phone in his pocket and went back to work. And the afternoon moved forward, and the day stayed hard in all the ways it was supposed to, and possible, in all the ways he needed. And that evening, when the work was done and Maya was home, and they were all three of them somehow in Lily's living room again, Maya with her homework, Lily with her sketchbook, Ethan with the very real and completely uncomplicated relief of being in a room with both of them. Lily looked up from her work and said, to no one in particular, do you want to order pizza? Maya said, obviously. Ethan said, I'll pay. Lily said, you paid last time. I know, we have a system. You made eggs this morning. That is not the same as pizza, Lily. She looked at him. He looked at her. Maya made a sound of theatrical suffering. Can someone just order the pizza? She said. I'm literally watching you two be a couple and it's embarrassing for everyone. Lily looked at Maya. We are not embarrassing. You're a little embarrassing, Maya said. Not meanly, warmly. Lily looked back at Ethan. He was trying not to smile. She pointed at him. Order the pizza. He ordered the pizza. Maya went back to her homework. Lily went back to her sketchbook. And Ethan Parker sat in Lily Morgan's living room on a Saturday night and felt, for the first time, in longer than he could accurately calculate, like everything in his life was in exactly the right place. He didn't know what was still coming. He didn't know about the conversation that would happen 6 days later, that would break something open between them, something older and deeper than boxes or birthday parties or airport arrivals. The thing neither of them had said yet. The one word that lived underneath everything and was waiting, patiently, to be spoken out loud. He didn't know any of that yet. What he knew was the smell of Lily's apartment and the sound of his daughter doing homework and the particular quality, os of a Saturday night that has nothing wrong with it. He let that be enough. For now it was more than enough. 6 days later, on a Friday morning, Ethan said something he hadn't planned to say. He didn't plan it. That was the part he kept coming back to afterward, not the saying of it, but the unplanned quality of it, the way it came out of his mouth before the careful, measured part of his brain had the chance to review it. He'd spent his whole adult life reviewing things before he said them, and then he didn't, and everything changed. It was early. 6:40 something. They were on her porch, the usual morning ritual that had become as natural as breathing her steps. His coffee, the Colorado morning doing what Colorado mornings do in November, which is arrive cold and clear and without apology. She was telling him about a phone call with her mother from the night before. Her mother's knee was worse than previously reported, which Lily had suspected, and her mother had been managing strategically. The way mothers manage things, they don't want to worry their children with. She needs the surgery, Lily said. She's been putting it off because she doesn't want to be a burden, which is insane, which I told her, which she disagreed with in the specific way she disagrees with things, just kind of humming and redirecting the conversation. What are you going to do? I'm going to take her to the consultation appointment next week and sit in the room so she can't edit the info before it gets to me. She paused. And I'm probably going to need to stay closer to home for a while. Maybe a lot of a while. That's okay. She looked at him sideways. I know it's okay. I'm not asking permission. I know you're not. I'm just saying it's okay. We figure it out. She looked back at her coffee. And something about the way she was sitting, the particular set of her shoulders, the tiredness she was holding quietly, the familiar way she managed difficult things alone, even when she didn't have to, anymore, broke something open in him. Fast and clean, like a window giving to weather. I love you, he said. She went completely still. He heard himself, felt the air change, and the careful reviewing part of his brain arrived approximately 4 seconds too late and stood there looking at the issue with nothing useful to contribute. He didn't take it back. He sat with it. She turned and looked at him with an expression he had never seen on her face before, not in the airport, not on the trail, not at the kitchen table, not on any of the mornings or evenings or dinners or difficult conversations in between. It was an expression with too many things in it to name, and all of them were moving. What, she said, very quietly. I love you, he said again. Stated here the second time, because the first time had already happened, and there was no point being uncertain about it now. She stared at him. He could see her chest moving with her breath. Ethan, I'm not taking it back. I'm not asking you to take it back. Her voice was careful. I need a second. Take as long as you need. Stop being calm. One of us has to be. She made a sound that was not quite a laugh, and not quite anything else. She stood up from the step, walked 3 feet across the porch, and stood with her back to him, hands wrapped around her mug, looking at the street. He watched her back. The tension in it, the processing, the enormous internal machinery of a woman who had spent years calibrating what to trust and was now being asked to calibrate something she hadn't seen coming. Then she turned around. Her eyes were very bright. I need to ask you something, she said. Ask. And I need you to answer it honestly. Not kindly, honestly. Those aren't mutually exclusive. But yes. She looked at him directly. Would you still feel this way if I looked different? He understood the question, completely and immediately, with no confusion about what she was actually asking. And he held it for a moment, not because he needed to think about the answer, but because the question deserved to land before the answer covered it. Yes, he said. You didn't hesitate, because I don't need to. Ethan, Lily. He met her gaze steadily. I know what you're asking. You're asking if what feel is about you, or about some idea of kindness or decency that has nothing to do with actual desire. And the answer is it's about you, specifically. The way you stand on this porch in wool socks. The way you argue about things you care about. The way you talk to my daughter like she's a complete person. The way you said I love you to her work when she showed you the science project last week when you thought I wasn't listening. The way you held that coffee mug on the trail. You. I'm not in love with the concept of you. I'm in love with the actual specific person who is currently staring at me from across this porch. She stared at him. Her jaw was very tight. Then she said I love you too, flat. Direct. Like she was reporting a fact she'd known for a while and had been deciding what to do with. I have for a while. I don't know exactly when. Somewhere between the hardware store and the egg sandwiches, I think. He exhaled. Actually exhaled, which told him how much air he'd been holding. She crossed back to the step and sat down beside him. Not dramatically, just sat, her shoulder against his arm. This is terrifying, she said. Yeah, I mean genuinely terrifying. I want you to appreciate how terrifying this is. I appreciate it, because I have worked very hard to be someone who doesn't need this. I know, and now I need it. I know that too, and it's very inconvenient. He looked at her sideways. She was looking at the street, jaw still tight, but the corner of her mouth was doing the thing it did. He said, "I find it pretty convenient, personally." She bumped her shoulder into his arm. "Hard. Don't be smug." "I'm not being smug. I'm being honest." "You're being smug under the cover of honesty. That's a very specific accusation." She turned and looked at him. Her eyes were still bright. "I love you," she said again, like she was testing the sound of it, like she was deciding if she could stand how it felt. "I really genuinely love you, and I have spent 6 weeks pretending I didn't, so I wouldn't have to figure out what to do about it." "What are you going to do about it?" She held his gaze. "Apparently stay," she said. "Apparently be terrified and stay. That works for me. It better." She looked back at the street, exhaled. Long and slow. "Okay," he agreed. They sat on the porch in the November cold, and the morning moved around them, and neither of them said anything else for a long time. And the silence was the best kind, the kind that means something has been said and received and is now simply settling into the ground where it belongs. 3 days after that, everything got harder. Not because of anything between them. Because of something that arrived from outside, the way real complications always do, not through the front door, but through the window you forgot to close. Ethan got a call at 10 in the morning from Glenn Harker. Not about the Phase 2 contract. About something else. Glenn had apparently been talking to other contractors in the area, and apparently someone had told him something about Ethan's capacity, his equipment, his ability to handle the full scope of the commercial work. Glenn delivered this information with the specific diplomatic precision of a man who was raising a concern while maintaining plausible deniability about where the concern originated. "I'm just saying," Glenn said, "that I've been hearing some things about the Parker Electric operation, about whether you've got the team for Phase 2. What specifically have you been hearing? That you've scaled back, that you're running lean, that you might not have the manpower for a job this size." Ethan knew exactly where this was coming from. There was one other contractor in the area who had wanted the Phase 2 contract and hadn't gotten it. A man named Dorsey who had a larger operation and a habit of solving problems by making competitors look smaller. Ethan knew this. He kept his voice level. "Glenn, I've done everything I've committed to on Phase 1 on time, under budget and with 0 callbacks. My team is exactly the right size for the work I take on, and I take on the work I can do right." He paused. "If that's changed for you, tell me now." A pause on Glenn's end. "I'm not saying it's changed. I'm just due diligence." "Then do your due diligence. Call my references. Walk the Phase 1 work. Talk to the building inspector. Then call me back." He hung up, stood in the job site parking lot with the phone in his hand, and felt the specific anger of a man who has built something clean being told it might not be clean enough by someone who hasn't looked. He called Lily. She picked up on the first ring. "Hey, you okay?" "No," he told her. Brief, direct, no dramatizing. She listened. When he finished, "Are you going to lose the contract?" "I don't know." "But you're not going to pretend the concern isn't there to seem confident?" "No." "Good. What do you need right now?" He stood in the parking lot. "I don't know that either." "Then come home. We'll figure it out when you get here." "We." She said it easily, naturally, without performing the word or highlighting it. Just we. He felt it settle somewhere below rational thought. "I'll be home by 4. I'll be here." He was home at 3:58. She was on his porch, his, not hers, sitting on steps with 2 cups of coffee, which meant she'd gone to his kitchen and made them, which meant she'd been in his house without him, which would have felt strange 6 weeks ago, and felt completely right now. He came up the walk, and she handed him a cup and moved over without being asked. He sat, drank. She let him be quiet for a full 3 minutes, which he knew, because he was aware of time the way you're aware of it when your mind is working hard. Then he said, "I built this slowly. I made decisions other contractors wouldn't make because I believed there was value in doing less work better, in having a team small enough to know every job personally." He turned the cup in his hands. "And someone is using that against me. Yep, it's not fair." "No, it's not. And Glenn Harker is a reasonable man who is now hearing unreasonable things through a reliable seeming channel. Also, yes." He looked at her. "You're agreeing with everything. Because everything you're saying is accurate. There's no point arguing with accuracy. She looked back at the street. The question is what you do with it. I do what I told Glenn. Let the work speak. And if it's not enough, he was quiet. Then I lose the contract, and I deal with that, and I don't let it tell me something false about the value of what I built. He exhaled. Which I know is the right answer. It just takes me a minute to get there. I know. She glanced at him. You got there faster than you would have 6 weeks ago. He looked at her. She was right. 6 weeks ago, he would have sat with the anger alone for days before reaching any kind of clarity. Would have managed it internally, presented it as fine, rebuilt around it without telling anyone what had been in the gap. He would have called it resilience. She would have called it what it was. Yeah, he said. I did. She looked at him steadily. That's me, in case you're wondering. I know it's you. Just making sure you're tracking the contribution. He almost smiled. Noted and appreciated. Glenn Harker called back the following Monday morning at 9 o'clock. Ethan was on the porch when the call came. Lily had just gone inside to start her workday. The morning ritual ending the way it always did now, with a coffee cup left on his step and the sound of her screen door. He answered. I did what you said, Glenn told him. Walked the Phase 1 work. Talked to your inspector contact. Called 2 of your references. A pause. The work is excellent. Ethan. I know. I also found out where the other information was coming from. Another pause. Heavier. I don't deal with that kind of thing. I should have pushed back before I called you. You were doing due diligence. I was doing someone else's dirty work without realizing it. Glenn's voice had the particular tone of a man who disliked discovering he'd been managed. We're moving forward. Phase 2, original terms. Start date in 4 weeks if you can make it work. Ethan looked at the empty porch step where Lily had been sitting 20 minutes ago. I'll make it work, he said. He called her immediately after. She was already at her desk. He could hear the particular quality of her workday concentration in the background. He called. Ethan said. We're on, obviously. He could hear the smile in it. You sound unsurprised. Because I'm not surprised. Your work is good, Ethan. That's not a matter of opinion. It's just true. I've never been worried about this part. He sat with that for a moment. You should let people know you're in their corner, he said. More often, the way you just were. He stopped. It's what? It means something. That you're not surprised. That you just know. A small pause. I know your work the way I know you, she said simply. Carefully and all the way through. He closed his eyes for a second. Open them dinner tonight. Pasta or that Thai place? Your choice. Thai place. I'll meet you there at 7. He was there at 6:55, and she was already at the table, which told him she'd been early too. And they ate dinner and talked about things that had nothing to do with contracts or fears or the calculations people made about other people. From the outside, they talked about Maya's decision timeline and Lily's nonprofit project and a podcast they'd both apparently been listening to without knowing it. And somewhere around the middle of dinner, Lily reached across the table and stole a piece of his spring roll without asking, and he moved his plate slightly toward her so she could reach better. She looked at the plate. Looked at him. You did that on purpose. Did what? Moved it closer. I don't know what you're talking about. She ate the spring roll. I love you, she said, like it was the natural next sentence. Because it was, I know, he said. She threw a napkin at him. He caught it. The real test came 9 days later, and it came from an angle neither of them had armored against. Lily's cousin Rachel called her on a Wednesday afternoon. Ethan wasn't there for the call, but he was there 20 minutes after it ended. When Lily knocked on his door with her jaw set and her eyes doing the thing they did when she was angry, and trying to keep it proportionate. He opened the door, read her face, stepped back. She came in. Rachel called. She said, going directly to the kitchen. He followed. She stood at the counter with her arms crossed. Not because she was closed off, but because she was holding herself together while she decided how mad to actually be. She wanted to tell me that some people from the birthday party have been talking. He went very still. What kind of talking? The kind where they've connected me to you. Our names together. And apparently, she stopped, pressed her lips together. Apparently, someone said something at brunch last weekend. About me specifically. About how it made sense that I'd end up with the neighbor. Because women like me tend to settle for what's available. The words hit him like something physical. She kept going, voice controlled. And Rachel, who loves me, called to warn me, which I appreciate. She also said she defended me, which I also appreciate. She unfolded her arms, put her hands flat on his counter. But here's the thing. Here is the thing, Ethan. She looked at him. I know those people are wrong. I know what this is. I have sat across from you and heard you say true things, and I believe you. I have built enough of myself back up that I know that comment is someone else's limitation, not mine. Okay, he said carefully. But it still landed, her voice cracked. Just once, clean and fast, and then she had it back. It still landed because I am a human being and I have a history, and I worked so hard, and I am so tired of being the person that other people assign a story to before they know a single fact. Her eyes were very bright. I am so tired of it. He crossed the kitchen in 3 steps and put his arms around her. She went stiff for exactly 1 second, the muscle memory of not leaning into things, and then she let go of it. She put her forehead against his shoulder and held on, and he held on back. And he felt her take a breath that shook and then steadied. He didn't say anything for a moment. He let the holding be enough, because sometimes the holding is the only thing that's actually useful. Then, against his shoulder, she said, I'm not leaving. I know, I just needed to be angry somewhere. You can be angry here, I know. A pause. Thank you. Don't thank me. She lifted her head. Her eyes were dry, she hadn't cried, and she wouldn't. Not about this, not today. Because she was Lily Morgan, and she had decided a long time ago that certain things didn't get her tears, and that was its own kind of strength. She looked at him with those clear, direct eyes. What do we do about it? Nothing, he said. She blinked. Nothing. What are our options? We can't stop people from talking. We can't control what gets said at someone's brunch. He held her gaze. What we can do is live in a way that makes the talking irrelevant, which we're already doing. She looked at him for a long moment. That's very sensible, I know. I hate how sensible it is. I know that too. She stepped back, straightened, recentered herself with that precision he'd come to recognize and admire, the physical and internal realignment of a woman who knew exactly where she stood and was choosing to stand there on purpose. Okay, she said. I'm going to go home and call Rachel and thank her, and then do 3 hours of work so the client doesn't feel the brunch drama. Okay. She picked up her jacket from where she'd dropped it on his chair. Then she stopped. Turned back to him. Ethan? Yeah. When you said we live in a way that makes it irrelevant. She held his gaze. What does that look like? Specifically. To you. He understood what she was asking. Not just philosophically. Concretely. What was the shape of this? What did he actually mean when he said we? He thought about it. Really thought. Not the quick, clean answer. The real one. It looks like what we've been doing, he said. Morning coffee. Dinner. The trail. Arguing about spring rolls. Being in each other's lives in a way that doesn't ask either of us to perform anything. He paused. And it looks like me telling you, I love you on a Wednesday morning, before either of us has planned anything. And it being true, and it still being true next Wednesday. She held his gaze for a long moment. And in a year, she said, when the contract is finished, when Maya has made her decision, when all the things currently in motion have landed somewhere, what does it look like then? He understood. This was the real question. The one underneath the one about the brunch. The one she'd been carrying for weeks and was now choosing to put down in front of him. It looks like us, he said, still. However, that needs to be configured. He held her gaze. I'm not building toward an exit, Lily. I'm building toward more. She was very still. More what, she said, barely above a whisper. I don't know the exact shape yet, but I know the direction. He didn't look away. Do you? She looked at him. He could see it moving through her, all the years of calibration and caution and earned wisdom. And underneath that, underneath all the armor she'd built, because the armor was necessary, and she'd needed it. The person she'd been before she learned to need it. The person she'd been becoming again. The person who showed up on his porch in the mornings and stole spring rolls and asked his daughter hard follow-up questions and stood at the edge of leaving and chose to stay. "Yeah," she said quietly. "I know the direction." He nodded once. She nodded once. And that was enough for now, because they were both people who understood that some things are built slowly and on purpose, and the direction matters more than the blueprint. She left. He stood in his kitchen and listened to the sound of her crossing the lawn, and he felt not relief exactly, and not the giddy lightness of something new, something more like the deep, grounded satisfaction of a foundation that has been tested and held. 2 days later, Maya made her decision. She came home from school on a Friday afternoon and found both Ethan and Lily in the kitchen. Lily at the counter, working on something on her laptop. Ethan at the stove, the domestic arrangement so ordinary by now that Maya barely paused. She dropped her backpack, got a glass of water, and stood at the kitchen entrance. "I'm not going to Boston," she said. Both of them looked up. Maya was very calm about it, the way she was calm about things that had required real thought. "I talked to Mom again. Long call. We cried a little." Which was weird but fine. She drank her water. "I'm going to go for the summer. 2 full months. And we're going to look at the science program together when I'm there. And if it still feels right for junior year, we'll talk again." She looked at Ethan. "But my home is here, right now. This is where I'm supposed to be." Ethan looked at his daughter for a long moment. He felt everything, the relief, the love, the complexity of being glad she was staying, while also being glad she'd made a real choice for herself, and not for him. He said, "Are you sure? Not for me, for you?" "For me," Maya said. Firmly, no hesitation. "I'm sure for me." She looked from him to Lily and back. "Also, I'm not leaving you two unsupervised for a full year. That's a secondary consideration, but it's real." Lily made a sound that was definitely a laugh disguised as a cough. Ethan looked at his daughter, and his daughter looked back at him with clear eyes that held both everything she'd worked through and everything she was walking toward. And he felt the specific pride that has nothing to do with performance, the pride of watching a person you love become exactly who they are. "Okay," he said. "Summer in Boston, summer in Boston." She put down her glass. "Now, what's for dinner? Because I have approximately 40 minutes of chemistry homework that is going to make me want to leave the country anyway." Lily closed her laptop. "I'll help. I took chemistry. Did you pass? Barely. But I remember where I went wrong, which is basically tutoring." Maya grabbed her backpack. "Good enough. Come on." They went to the table together. Ethan turned back to the stove, and behind him was the sound of Lily explaining something about molecular bonds and Maya arguing with the explanation in a way that meant she was engaged. And the kitchen was full of the specific warm noise of people who are comfortable with each other. He cooked. He listened. He let himself stand in the ordinary miracle of a Friday night and feel it completely. Later, after Maya was in her room and the dishes were done, Lily stood in his kitchen doorway with her jacket in her hand, ready to go home for the night, and she looked at him with the expression he'd been learning to read, the one that meant she was about to say something real. "She chose to stay," Lily said. "She chose to stay. Not because of Boston or the school or your feelings or any external thing." Lily looked at him. "She chose this house, this neighborhood, this." She gestured gently at the space between them. "You raised someone who knows what she wants and chooses it clearly. That's not an accident, Ethan." He looked at her standing in his kitchen doorway in her jacket, matter of fact and warm and completely present, and felt the word he'd said on the porch 6 days ago settle deeper into him, permanent now, past the point of questioning. "Stay," he said. She looked at him. "It's late. I know. Maya's home. I know. I'm not." She stopped. "I know," he said again. "Just stay. 1 more hour. We can sit on the porch." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she set her jacket back down on the chair. "1 more hour," she said. They went out to the porch. Her steps. The November air with real cold in it now. The mountains invisible in the dark but present. The neighborhood quiet at this hour. Just the two of them and the light from her string of warm bulbs along the railing. She sat. He sat close. Her shoulder against his arm. The contact easy and natural and chosen. "I've been thinking," she said, after a while. "About what?" "About what you said." "More." She paused. I've been thinking about what more looks like. For me. She turned to look at him. I want to keep my house, I know. I want my mornings. My work, my independence, I know all of that, and I want this. She held his gaze. Whatever this is becoming. I want this too. I don't want to choose between them. You don't have to. You're sure? Lily. He looked at her steadily. I fell in love with a woman who built herself back up from nothing and came home knowing exactly who she was. I'm not asking you to dismantle that. I'm asking to be part of it. She held his gaze for a long time. Then she leaned her head against his shoulder. Just rested it there. Easy, natural. Like she'd been doing it for years. He stayed very still, and then he exhaled and settled, and let the night be exactly what it was. They sat like that for more than an hour. Neither of them mentioned the time. The morning after they sat on the porch for more than an hour, Ethan woke up and lay in the dark for exactly 60 seconds before he understood that something had permanently shifted. Not dramatically, not with any announcement, just shifted. The way weight redistributes. Once he set down something you've been carrying, so long you forgot it had mass. He got up, made coffee. 2 cups, walked across the lawn. Her light was already on. She opened the door before he knocked. Which meant she'd heard him coming. Which meant she'd been watching for him. Which meant she was done pretending she wasn't. She was in her robe, hair down, holding her own cup already made, and she looked at his 2 cups and said, I already made mine. I know. So you made an extra cup for no reason. I made it because I wanted to bring it. She looked at him. He looked at her. She stepped back and let him in. They sat at her kitchen table in the early morning with 4 cups of coffee between 2 people, which was objectively too much coffee and also completely right. And she told him her mother's surgery was scheduled for the following Thursday, and she was nervous about it in the specific way. Adult children are nervous about their parents' vulnerability, not panicked, just newly sharply aware of time. She's going to be fine, he said. I know she's going to be fine. The surgeon has a 94% success rate, and it's a routine procedure. She wrapped her hands around her mug. I'm nervous anyway. That's allowed. I know it's allowed. I'm just noting it. Do you want me to come with you? To the surgery. She looked at him across the table. Really looked. You have the phase 2 start that week. I can rearrange the first day. Ethan, Lily. He held her gaze. Do you want me there or not? Don't manage the answer around my schedule. She was quiet for a moment. Her jaw did the thing it did when she was fighting the habit of minimizing. Then yes, I want you there. Then I'll be there. She looked at her coffee. Looked back up. Okay. Quietly. Like she was still getting used to the weight of someone showing up without being managed into it. He stayed for breakfast. She made eggs again. She made eggs the way she did everything practical. With focused, no-nonsense competence. And Maya came downstairs at 7:15 and found them both at the kitchen table and said, without breaking stride toward the refrigerator, You're here early. I live next door. That's not an answer. She poured juice. Looked at the 4 coffee cups. That's a lot of coffee. We're aware, Lily said. Maya sat down, assessed the scene with the calm thoroughness of someone who had already processed this situation weeks ago and was now simply observing current data. Lily, she said. Yes, are you going to be at Thanksgiving? The table went very quiet. Ethan looked at his daughter. Maya was looking at Lily with complete, genuine directness, not manipulative, not playing anything. Just asking a question that she'd apparently decided was appropriate to ask. Lily looked at Maya, then at Ethan, then back at Maya. I hadn't thought about it, she said carefully. You should think about it, Maya said. We do a real one. Dad cooks. I make the pie, which is better than his pie, which he will tell you is not true, and he will be wrong. She picked up her juice. Just something to consider. She finished breakfast, collected her backpack, and left for school with the composure of someone who had absolutely not just engineered a significant conversational moment. Ethan and Lily sat in the silence she'd left behind. She's terrifying, Lily said. I've been saying that since she was 9. She gets it from you. She gets it from herself. Lily looked at the door Maya had just walked through. Then she looked at him. Is she serious? About Thanksgiving? Maya doesn't say things she's not serious about. That's also you. He looked at her steadily. Come for Thanksgiving, Lily. She held his gaze. That's a family thing. Yes. I'm not. She stopped. You're not what? She looked at him. And he saw it, the old reflex. The one that had lived in her for years. The one that said, don't assume you belong at the table. Don't insert yourself into spaces that weren't explicitly built for you. Wait to be certain. Don't need too much. He watched it move through her face. And then he watched her choose against it, deliberately. The way she'd been choosing against it for weeks, every day. A small and deliberate act of staying forward. Okay, she said. Thanksgiving, he smiled. She pointed at him. Don't be smug about it. I'm not being smug. You have the smug face. This is just my face. She stood up and took both of their cups to the sink, and he watched her move through her kitchen and thought, this ordinary morning. This is the thing. 3 weeks later, Mrs. Morgan had her surgery. Ethan was in the waiting room at 7:40 in the morning, in his work jacket, because he'd come directly from dropping Maya at school, holding a terrible cup of hospital coffee and watching Lily sit across from him, with her hands folded in her lap and her jaw set, and the specific stillness of a person who is managing fear by being very precise about their posture. He moved from his chair to the one beside her without announcing it. She looked at him sideways. Didn't say anything. He sat close enough that their arms touched, and she didn't move away from it. The surgery took 2 hours and 14 minutes. Lily tracked every minute. He didn't look at the clock once. He looked at her, and when she checked the clock, he said something not always meaningful. Sometimes just words, an observation about the coffee, a story about a job from years ago, a question about her nonprofit project, and she would answer, and the minute would pass, and the next one would come. When the surgeon came out, Lily stood up fast. Ethan stood up beside her. The surgeon said, everything went perfectly. She's in recovery. Lily exhaled a breath that she'd apparently been holding since the surgery was scheduled. She pressed her hand briefly to her mouth, then lowered it. Very controlled, very precise. Can I see her? In about an hour. She nodded. Turned to Ethan. Her eyes were bright but dry. Thank you for being here, she said. Stop thanking me. I'm going to keep thanking you. Then I'm going to keep ignoring it. She made a sound that was mostly laugh, slightly waterlogged, and briefly put her forehead against his shoulder 1 second, 2, and then straightened back up. Okay, she said. 1 hour. They sat back down. This time she was closer. He didn't point that out either. When they finally got to see Mrs. Morgan, the older woman was groggy but present, and she looked at the two of them standing in the doorway of her recovery room and said, with the satisfied clarity of someone who had been right about something for a long time, I always liked you, Ethan Parker. Lily said, Mom. I'm just saying what I see. You're on anesthesia. My opinions are still my opinions, Mrs. Morgan looked between them. How long has this been happening? 2 months, Ethan said. Longer, her mother said serenely and closed her eyes. Lily stood at the foot of her mother's bed and looked at Ethan with an expression that was 30% exasperated and 70% something much softer. She's going to be insufferable about this, he said quietly. She raised you, he said. She earned it. Lily pressed her lips together, but she didn't argue. The month that followed was the most ordinary and the most extraordinary of Ethan's adult life. He started phase 2 on the commercial contract. The work was demanding, the schedule tight, and he managed both with the focused efficiency of a man who had negotiated his time deliberately and was now spinning it the way he'd intended. He was home for dinner. Not every night. This work didn't allow for every night, but most nights. And when he wasn't, he texted, and that was different from how he'd operated before, and he knew it, and he didn't pretend otherwise. Lily was finishing the nonprofit project. She talked about it the way she talked about work that mattered, precisely, passionately, with specific detail about every decision and a particular intensity around the elements that were hardest to get right. He listened the way. He listened to things that interested him. Completely. Asking real questions, filing things away. She noticed him filing things away and called him on it one evening. You're doing the memorizing thing, she said. What memorizing thing? Where you go quiet, and I can tell you're actually storing something. You've done it 4 times tonight. I find what you do interesting. She looked at him. You could just say that. I just did, she pointed at him. Don't be charming. I'm not doing anything. You're being charming under the cover of sincerity. That's the second time you've accused me of hiding something under something else. Because you do it constantly, and you don't even know you're doing it. She wasn't angry about it. She was affectionate about it. In the specific way, she was affectionate about the things she'd learned to recognize as distinctly his. He understood, in that moment, with total clarity, that this was what it was supposed to feel like. Not the airport arrival. Not the first dinner. Not the morning he'd said, I love you. This being known in the small, specific ways. Being called on the particular habits of yourself. Being seen all the way down to the reflexes. He understood something else in that moment, too. Something that had been building for weeks. Assembling itself quietly in the back of his mind the way decisions sometimes do, not announced. Not dramatic. Just gathering shape until the shape is undeniable. He didn't say it that night. He filed it. Thanksgiving arrived the way Colorado Novembers arrive, fast and cold, and suddenly completely present, as if fall had simply decided it was done and handed the keys to winter. Ethan cooked. This was established, non-negotiable, something he'd been doing since the first Thanksgiving after Sarah left. When Maya was 8 and they'd had a slightly chaotic, but ultimately triumphant dinner for two that had set a precedent he'd maintained ever since. He was a competent, everyday cook and an excellent Thanksgiving cook, which he attributed to the fact that Thanksgiving rewarded precision and patience, and he had both. Maya made the pie. She made it with the focused seriousness of a person engaged in legitimate craft. She'd been perfecting her grandmother's apple pie recipe for 3 years, and each iteration was genuinely better than the last. And she knew it, and she was gracious about knowing it, which was the best kind of knowing. Lily arrived at 11 with wine and her mother's contribution, a cranberry relish that Mrs. Morgan had apparently insisted on making from her recovery chair, and which Lily had helped execute, while her mother provided precise verbal direction, despite being technically supposed to be resting. She carried it in, like it was a professional delivery, which it essentially was. She walked into his house and stopped. The kitchen was active, something on every burner. The oven running, the particular organized chaos of a Thanksgiving in progress. Maya was at the counter with her pie dough. Ethan was at the stove. The whole house smelled like butter and sage, and something sweet from the oven. Lily stood in the doorway and took it in. He looked up and saw her face. Just for a second, unguarded, open, something moving through it that she wasn't managing or containing, just feeling. And then she saw him watching and she straightened and held up the cranberry relish. My mother sends her love and approximately 6 specific instructions about how this should be served. I will follow every one of them, he said. She came into the kitchen. Maya looked up. You're here. I brought relish. Is it the cranberry one? Yes. Maya pointed at the counter. Put it there. And wash your hands. I need someone to hold the bowl while I do the lattice. Lily set down the relish, washed her hands, and held the bowl. Ethan watched them from the stove, his daughter directing. Lily following directions with good-natured, competent compliance. The two of them talking about the lattice pattern and whether it was structurally necessary or purely aesthetic. And Maya's position was structurally necessary. And Lily's position was both. And neither of them was backing down. He turned back to the stove. He was smiling and he didn't try to stop. Dinner was at 2. Just the 3 of them, and one empty chair that was not sad, but simply indicated future possibility. And the food was good. And the conversation moved easily between 3 people who had, by this point, developed the specific fluency of a chosen family, the shared references, the established jokes, the comfortable silences, the way each of them knew when the others needed space and when they needed engagement. Midway through the meal, Maya said, with the careful casualness that indicated premeditation, Lily, are you staying for the rest of the weekend? Lily looked up. Ethan looked at Maya. She has her own house, Maya. I know she has her own house. I'm asking if she's staying. Maya looked at Lily directly. You don't have to. I'm just asking. Lily looked at Ethan. He held her gaze and said nothing, because this was her choice, and he wasn't going to engineer it even gently. She looked back at Maya. I'll stay tonight, she said. If that's okay. It's very okay, Maya said. and went back to her food with the composure of someone who had planned this and was declining to be obvious about it. Ethan looked at his daughter. She did not look back at him. He looked at Lily. She was looking at her plate with the specific expression she wore when she was trying not to smile too much. He reached across the table and took her hand briefly, just squeezed. Once, and she squeezed back, and neither of them made a thing of it. That evening, after the dishes were done, and Maya had retreated to her room, with her phone and her hard-won leftover pie, Ethan and Lily sat on his porch. Her porch lights were off next door. His were on. The November cold was real and deep, and they were in their coats. 2 cups of tea, because it was too late for coffee. And the neighborhood was quiet in the specific way it gets quiet after a holiday, when everyone has eaten too much and gone inside. He had been carrying the thing he'd filed away for 3 weeks. He'd been waiting for the right time, and he'd been waiting to understand what right time meant for something like this. And somewhere in the middle of Thanksgiving dinner, watching Lily hold Maya's pie bowl and argue about lattice work, he'd understood that right time was a concept designed for people who hadn't already figured out what they wanted. He'd figured out what he wanted. The time was just now. "I need to tell you something," he said. She turned to look at him, read his face, sat up slightly. "Okay, I've been thinking about it for a while. I want to say it right." "You always want to say things right. This one especially." She was very still, watching him. "Say it," she said quietly. He turned to face her fully. "When you came back, when you walked through those airport doors, I told myself I was just the neighbor. That I was doing the right thing by a woman who needed a ride. And I believed that for about 20 minutes until you asked if I missed you, and I had no idea what to say, because the true answer was so much bigger than the question." She didn't move, didn't breathe almost. "I've spent 5 years building a life that was complete," he said. "I didn't think I was missing anything. I had Maya. I had work. I had enough. And then you came back, and I understood that complete and whole are different things. And I'd had the first and been missing the second for years, without knowing what to call the absence." Her jaw was very tight. Her eyes were doing the thing. "I love you," he said. "I've told you that. But I haven't told you what it means to me in specific terms. And I think you need to hear the specific terms." He held her gaze. "It means I want you at the table. Not just dinner, the table. The decisions, the hard weeks, the good ones, the ordinary Tuesdays. It means I want your mother to send instructions about cranberry relish, and I want to follow them. It means I want Maya to argue with you about pie lattice for the next 40 years. It means—" He stopped, took a breath. "It means I want to stop living next door to you." She stared at him. "Not because I want to take your space," he said immediately. "You keep your house. You keep your mornings. You keep everything you built. I'm not asking you to dismantle anything. I'm asking if you'd be willing to build something new. Together. Whatever shape that takes. Whatever pace makes sense." He looked at her steadily. "I'm asking if you want to stop being my neighbor and start being my person. Officially. Completely. No more careful distance." The silence that followed was the longest of his life. She looked at him. He could see every layer of her processing it. The woman who had learned to protect herself. The woman who had rebuilt from the ground up. The woman who had stood at the edge of leaving and chosen to stay. The woman who had sat on this porch in wool socks at 6 in the morning and let herself be known. All the way through. Then she said, "You want to stop being careful. I want to stop being careful. After spending your entire adult life being careful. Yes. Because of me. Because of you specifically. Yes." She looked at him for another long moment. Then she said, very quietly, "If I said yes to this, if I said I want that too, you understand what I'd need. Still, tell me anyway. Not forever, but for now, yes, my work, my independence. My mornings, yes, always, and if something is hard, you tell me. You don't go quiet and manage it internally, and present me with the fine version afterward." He held her gaze. "I'll tell you. I'm serious about that one. I know you are. I'll tell you." She looked at him. One more beat. Long and searching, and full of everything she'd learned about him over these months. Everything she'd decided to trust. Everything she'd chosen to stay for. Then she said, "I want that too." He exhaled. She reached out and took his hand. both hands around his, the way she held her coffee mugs. Warm and complete and deliberate. "I want the table," she said. "The ordinary Tuesdays. Your daughter arguing with me about structural integrity of pastry." She paused. "I want to stop being your neighbor." "Yeah? Yeah." She looked at him with those clear, direct, completely unguarded eyes. "I came back to Colorado because I needed to know I had a choice, that I could be here on my own terms or not at all." She squeezed his hands. "I'm here on my own terms, and my terms include you." He brought her hands up briefly, pressed them, held them. She let him. The city was quiet around them, and the mountains were invisible in the dark but real, and the porch light made a warm circle in the November cold. And somewhere inside his house, his daughter was probably still awake, probably aware of exactly what was being decided out here, probably declining to be obvious about it. He thought about 5 years of not thinking about someone. He thought about an airport and a gray suitcase and 4 words whispered across a crowded arrivals hall. He thought about wool socks on porch steps and coffee made exactly right and a hand extend above boulder and bot and boxes that weren't ordered and a head on his shoulder in the November dark. He thought about how the answer to her question had never actually been complicated. Just slow. "You know what I should have said," he said. "At the airport." She looked at him. "When I asked if you missed me." "Yeah." She tilted her head slightly. "What should you have said?" He looked at her, at the woman she'd built herself into, at everything she'd survived to become, at the person sitting beside him right now, choosing to be here on purpose. And he said, "Yes, every single day. I just didn't understand what I was missing until you walked back through the door, and I understood all at once that the life I'd built was waiting for one specific person to make it whole." She looked at him for a long, full, silent moment. Then she said, "That's a much better answer. I know. You should have led with that, I'm telling you now. It took you 3 months. I needed the time to get it right." She looked at him. Something in her face settled all the way down, past the careful architecture, past the earned armor, past the years of calibrating what to trust, into something simple and unguarded and completely certain. "Okay," she said softly. "Okay, you got it right," he smiled. She smiled back. The real one, the one that reached all the way to her eyes, and didn't apologize for taking up space. They sat on the porch in the cold for a long time after that, neither of them keeping track of the hour. Her head eventually on his shoulder, his arm around her, the contact, easy and natural and permanent feeling, in the way that only real things feel, not because they were certain about every detail, but because they were certain about each other, and that was enough to build everything else on. Inside the house, Maya's light went off at 10:45. He noticed. Lily noticed too. She was waiting, Lily said. She was definitely waiting. To make sure it went okay. To make sure I didn't mess it up. He paused. Her words. Lily laughed, warm and full and unguarded. The laugh she didn't perform for rooms anymore, but gave freely to the people she'd decided deserved it. "She's going to be so unbearable about this tomorrow. Completely unbearable. I'm looking forward to it." So am I. The night held them. Colorado cold and porch light and 2 people who had taken the long way to the right place, which is the only way that makes you certain you've actually arrived. In the morning, there would be coffee. 2 cups, walked across a lawn that had become as familiar as breathing. There would be a 14-year-old who would say nothing about the night before and communicate everything through the simple act of setting 3 plates instead of 2. There would be work and calls, and the ongoing construction of a life that had room for all of them. But that was morning. Right now was this. Lily Morgan, with her head on Ethan Parker's shoulder, her hands warm around her tea, looking at the street she'd come back to, because something in her had known what she was missing, even before she understood what to call it. And Ethan Parker, who had spent 5 years building a life that was complete, finally understanding the difference between complete and whole and knowing, with the deep, grounded certainty of a man who had taken long enough to be sure that he was holding the answer to that difference right now. He pressed his cheek briefly to the top of her head. She stayed exactly where she was. The night was quiet. The mountains were there in the dark, permanent and enormous and entirely unconcerned with human timelines. Some things take exactly as long as they take, And when they finally arrive, they arrive completely, with no loose edges, no unresolved questions, no wondering if you got it right. He'd gotten it right. They both had. And that all of it, every ordinary extraordinary piece of it, was exactly enough.